In 2022, in Daejeon, we adopted the Pact for the Future, a shared political horizon to renew the social contract and make multilateralism deliver where it counts the most, right where people live. Since then, the world has kept shifting. Crises have deepened and inequalities have grown. New generations are joining the shared effort to create a brighter future, but through it all, our cities and regions have stayed on the front line, listening, protecting, and innovating. Now in Tangier, our movement gathers once again. We are not here just to reflect, we are here to act. We are here to turn our vision into reality through local public services, because a brighter future cannot be designed in isolation. Across assemblies, dialogues, local actions, and collective spaces, leaders, communities, and partners will come together to shape the next chapter of the municipal movement. Communities are calling for public services that protect dignity, expand opportunities, and respond to the daily realities. Their voices are not just an addition to this conversation, they are the conversation. Tangier is our moment to move from mandate to delivery. It is time to champion the everyday essentials that sustain our lives, to recognize housing as a public good, to secure food systems as pillars of dignity, to deliver peace and conflict prevention as a shared responsibility, to shape public health through our territorial realities, to demand climate action as a matter of justice, to unlock transformative local finance to achieve our goals, to defend cultural rights as the cornerstone of democratic communities, the everyday essentials that keep us going. Our challenges are interconnected, and so are our solutions. In Tangier, local and regional governments are speaking with one united voice, a voice committed to confronting discrimination, recognizing young people as political actors, and reaffirming feminist municipalism as a core condition for democracy. The future of democracy, equality, and peace must be built from the territories. It lives in the relationships, the economies, the public services, and the local institutions that sustain us every single day. The next chapter begins here.
Welcome, everyone. The next chapter already started. Thank you very much for joining us at this United Cities and Local Governments World Congress. Thank you for joining us at our General Assembly. It is the very first time that we bring our partners and our policy debates to the heart of our decision-making. To the General Assembly. We started this morning with the Executive Bureau, and today we are very pleased to welcome many of our partners, the Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights of Internally Displaced People, our colleagues from OECD, the Executive Director of the Center for Livable Cities, the Head of Innovation of UNIDO, the President of Open Society Foundation, the Secretaries General of CLGF and ICLEI, and many, many other partners, including Peace in Our Cities, etc., that are going to be joining us throughout these days in the wonderful city of Tangier. Our General Assembly has a very meaningful agenda today where we're going to be talking about our strategy post-2030. We're going to be talking as well about coalitions on local innovation. We are grateful that you are all here and to welcome you in this city and to the General Assembly. I'm delighted to have with us our host, a very important person for us, always, but in particular these days, the Mayor of Tangier, Munir Limuri. Thank you, Mayor.
مساء الخير زميلاتي زملائي الأعزاء الأصدقاء الأعزاء يشرفني ويسعدني أيما سعادة أن أرحب بكم في مدينة طنجة بمناسبة انعقاد الجمعية العامة لمنظمة المدن والحكومات المحلية المتحدة. باسم مدينة طنجة يطيب لي أن أتقدم بأحر التحيات وأصدق العبارات الترحيب إلى جميع الرؤساء والعمد والمحافظين والمستشارين، وإلى جمعيات الحكومات المحلية والشركاء والأصدقاء القادمين من مختلف المدن العالمية. ليشاركونا هذا الحدث الكبير. لطالما كانت طنجة ملتقى للقارات والثقافات والحضارات، فعلى امتداد تاريخها العريق نسجت مدينتنا هويتها بفضل التبادل والحوار والانفتاح على العالم. ومن هنا يكتسب استقبالنا للحركة البلدية العالمية أهمية بالغة، لا سيما في هذه المرحلة التي بات فيها التعاون والتضامن بين الأقاليم أشد ضرورة من أي وقت مضى. خلال أعمال هذا المؤتمر سنتداول معا في مستقبل حركتنا وفي الدور المنوط بالحكومات المحلية والإقليمية في التصدي للتحديات التي تواجه مجتمعاتنا، وفي الأولويات التي ستوجه خطانا في المرحلة ما بعد أجندة 2030. كما سنحتفي بالمكتسبات التي تحققت إبان الولاية المنتهية، ونعد العدة للانتقال إلى فصل جديد في مسيرة منظمتنا. وإنني على يقين تام بأن النقاشات التي تجمعنا في طنجة ستسهم في تعميق التزامنا المشترك بقيم السلام والإدماج والديمقراطية والتنمية المستدامة، فضلاً عما سترسخه من مكانة الحكومات المحلية والإقليمية بوصفها فاعلاً جوهرياً في بناء غد أفضل للجميع. في الأيام المقبلة ستغدو طنجة مدينتكم أنتم، وخارج نطاق جلساتنا الرسمية يحدوني الأمل الصادق أن تتاح لكم الفرصة لاكتشاف طابعها الفريد والتعرف على إرثها التاريخي والتمتع بدفء أهلها وكرم ضيافتهم. نحن القادة المحليين نعلم جيداً أن المدن أكبر من أن تختزل في الاجتماعات التي تستضيفها، فهي المجتمعات التي تحتضنها والفضاءات العامة التي تجمع الناس والذاكرة المشتركة التي تربطنا ببعضنا. لذا أتطلع إلى أن تكون إقامتكم في طنجة ثرية بنتائجها وعميقة في أثرها، وأن تحملوا منها ذكريات لا تمحى. أتمنى لكم مداولات مثمرة ومؤتمرا موفقا ناجحا، وأتوجه بالشكر الجزيل لمنحكم طنجة شرف احتضان هذا الحدث البارز في مسيرة منظمتنا. وبهذا يسعدني أن أعلن افتتاح الجمعية العامة، وبدون إطالة أعطي الكلمة للسيد العمدة الطاي من أجل قراءة تقرير الرئاسة، فليتفضل مشكورا.
I will speak in Turkish. Ben de sözlerimin başında Tangier Belediye Başkanımıza ve Fas Krallığı'nın değerli temsilcilerine bu güzel ve sıcak organizasyondan dolayı teşekkürlerimi, şükranlarımı sunuyorum. Şehirlerindeki yoğun gündemlerine rağmen UCLG önceleyerek bugün salonda bulunan tüm yerel yönetim mensuplarını da saygıyla selamlıyorum. Bu genel kurula 2022-2026 dönemi UCLG Başkanlık raporunu sunmaktan büyük bir onur duyuyorum. Değerli meslektaşlarım, 2022-2026 dönemine ait UCLG Başkanlık raporunu genel kurula sunmak benim için çok kıymetli. Neredeyse 4 yıl önce Dijon'da bir araya geldiğimizde insanlığın geleceği için pakt kabul etmiştik. Bunu dünyanın halihazırda derin bir belirsizlik, artan eşitsizlikler, demokratik kırılganlık ve hızlanan iklim krizleriyle karşı karşıya olduğu bir dönemde yaptık. Yerel ve bölgesel yönetimlerin kendilerini bu krizlerin sonuçlarını yönetmekle sınırlayamayacaklarını o zaman da anlamıştık. Yeni bir siyasi ufkun şekillenmesine katkıda bulunmamız gerekiyordu. Başkanlığın görev süresi boyunca yürüttüğü çalışmaları bu inanç şekillendirmiştir. Değerli Caroline Kose, Yan Van Zanen, Lee Jong-woo ve şahsım tarafından sırayla sürdürülen işbirliğine dayalı dönüşümlü liderlik modeli aracılığıyla hareketimizin tek bir sesle konuşmasını sağlarken aynı zamanda bölgelerimizin ve coğrafyalarımızın çeşitliliğini yansıtmaya çalıştık. Dijon'da kabul edilen vizyonu ortaya koymak ve bunu somut siyasi eyleme dönüştürmek için hep birlikte çalıştık. Çalıştığımız dönemler içinde bir konu giderek daha da net hale geldi. İnsanlığın karşı karşıya olduğu zorluklar yerel düzeyde yaşanmaktadır. İster barınma, gıda güvenliği, sağlık, göç, iklim değişikliği, eşitsizlik, ister barıştan söz edelim, bunlar soyut küresel tartışmalar değildir. Bunlar sokaklarımızda, mahallelerimizde ve toplumlarımızda her gün yaşanan gerçekliklerdir. Yönetimin asıl sınavı verdiğimiz vaatler değil, insanların ev dedikleri yerlerde onurlu bir şekilde yaşayıp yaşamadıklarıdır. Bu anlayış yerel çok taraflılığı güçlendirmeye yönelik ortak çabalarımıza yön vermiştir. Küresel görev gücündeki ortaklarımızla birlikte uluslararası sistem içinde yerel ve bölgesel yönetimlerin tanınmasını ileri bir noktaya taşıdık. Birleşmiş Milletler Gelecek Paktı'nda 55 sayılı eylemin kabul edilmesi, küresel gündemlerin ilerletilmesinde yerel ve bölgesel yönetimlerin rolünü resmen tanıyan tarihi bir dönüm noktası olmuştur. Genel Sekreterin yerel ve bölgesel yönetimler danışma grubunun çalışmaları, çok taraflılığın geleceğinin daha kapsayıcı, bölgelere daha bağlı ve insanların günlük gerçeklerine daha duyarlı olması gerektiğini bir kez daha ortaya koymuştur. Aynı zamanda bakım, eşitlik, demokrasi ve sürdürülebilirliğe dayalı bir kalkınma vizyonunu ilerletmeye devam ettik. Küresel feminist belediye hareketini güçlendirdik. Sağlık ve insan hakları gündemlerinin yerelleştirilmesini ilerlettik. Gençliğin liderliğini destekleyip iklim adaletini teşvik ettik. Barış gündemimizi sağlamlaştırdık. Göç, kültür, finans ve demokratik yönetişim alanlarındaki katılımlarımızı genişlettik. Bu çabalar münfelit girişimler değildir. Bunlar yakınlık, katılım ve haklara evrensel erişim yoluyla güveni yeniden inşa etmeyi amaçlayan ortak bir siyasi projenin parçasıdır. Hareketimiz 2030 gündeminin son yıllarına yaklaşırken aynı zamanda uygulamaya odaklanmanın ötesinde bundan sonra ne olacağını şekillendirmeye başlamamız gerektiğini ihtiyacını da idrak etmiştir. Yerel sosyal sözleşme işte bu ruhla doğmuştur. Yerel ve bölgesel yönetimler, örgütlü sivil toplum ve stratejik ortaklarla birlikte geliştirilen bu sözleşme, bir sonraki küresel kalkınma gündemine yaptığımız kolektif katkıyı temsil etmektedir. Sözleşme, evrensel yerel kamu hizmetlerinin yalnızca hizmet sunum araçları değil, aynı zamanda demokrasi, eşitlik, aidiyet ve barışın temelidir. Bu nedenle yerel sosyal sözleşme siyasi bir bildiriden daha fazladır. Bu bir eylem çağrısıdır. Bakımı kamusal yaşamın merkezine yerleştirme, gündelik yaşam alanlarında insan haklarını savunma, temel hizmetleri ortak fayda olarak geri kazanma ve gelecek nesillerin bugün bildiğimiz topluluklardan daha adil, dayanıklı ve kapsayıcı toplulukları miras almasını sağlama taahhüdüdür. Değerli meslektaşlarım, önünüzde bulunan bu rapor, dünya çapında binlerce yerel ve bölgesel liderin, uygulayıcının, ortağın ve topluluğun çalışmalarını yansıtmaktadır. Bu rapor, değişimin başka yerlerde gerçekleşmesini beklemeyip, onu kendi bölgelerinde öncülük etmeyi seçen bir hareketin hikayesini anlatmaktadır. Yolculuğumuzun bir sonraki bölümünü hazırlamak üzere Tangier'da bir araya gelirken, bu dönemi gururla hatırlayacağımıza inanıyorum. Ancak her şeyden önemlisi geleceğe güvenle bakabilmemizdir. Çünkü bu yıllardan çıkarılacak bir ders varsa o da demokrasi, sürdürülebilirlik ve barışın geleceğinin insanlardan uzak bir yerde inşa edilmeyeceğidir. Bu gelecek insanların yaşadığı yerlerde inşa edilecektir. Şehirlerimizde, bölgelerimizde ve topluluklarımızda. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Genel kurulun bu raporu kayda geçirdiğini kabul ederek şimdi sözü başkanlık üyelerimizden değerli dostum, meslektaşım Lahey Belediye Başkanı Sayın Yanvan Zanen'e bırakmak istiyor. Hepinizi saygıyla selamlıyorum. Thank you.
Dear all, let me say a few words on the theme of local multilateralism for peace. Dear colleagues, throughout this mandate, our movement has been guided by a simple but very powerful conviction that democracy, equality, and sustainability can only thrive where people feel protected, respected, and connected to one another. Today, as we gather in a world marked by conflict, polarization, and growing uncertainty, the question of peace has become impossible to ignore. Yet peace is too often understood only through the lens of international diplomacy or the absence of war. For local and regional governments, peace begins much closer to people's daily lives. Peace is built when people have access to local public services, to housing, education, healthcare, and culture. It is built when diversity is embraced rather than feared. It is built when communities trust their institutions and when public spaces become places of encounter rather than division. Peace is not only the absence of violence, it is the presence of rights, dignity, belonging, and hope. This understanding has increasingly shaped the work of our organization. Through the World Forum of Cities and Territories of Peace, the Municipal Peace Talks, the Hague Charter on Municipal Peace, the Peace Prize, and the local social governance process, we have sought to demonstrate that local and regional governments are not merely stakeholders in peace building, they are peace builders in their own right. This everyday work reveals something deeper. Holding communities together cannot be sustained where exclusion, inequality, and institutional neglect persist, just as development cannot endure without collective well-being, stability, and hope. Against this backdrop, our municipal movement offers both response and a blueprint for transformation. A local infrastructure for peace built on local democracy, human rights, and universal access to local public services. This everyday work reveals something deeper. Holding communities together cannot be sustained where exclusion, inequality, and institutional neglect persist. And against this, and at a time when multilateralism itself is being questioned, local governments continue to offer something that the world urgently needs: proximity, dialogue, and trust. Every day, cities and territories create spaces where differences can coexist, where conflicts can be prevented, and where solidarity can be organized across communities and generations. And this is why local multilateralism matters. Local multilateralism is not simply about ensuring that local governments have a seat at international tables. It is about bringing the realities of communities into global decision-making. It is about building a multilateralism that listens, connects, and that delivers. A multilateralism capable of restoring trust by grounding global action in people's everyday lives. The dialogue we are about to hold, dear friends, therefore comes at a crucial moment. As the international community begins to reflect on the future beyond the 2030 agenda, local and regional governments have a responsibility not only to implement peace, but also to help redefine it. And I'm honored to welcome our distinguished speakers and partners, and I look forward to an inspiring conversation on how local multilateralism can contribute to building more peaceful, inclusive, and resilient society to current and future generations. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve. And now we have our dialogue on local multilateralism for peace, and I would like Mrs. Fatoumata Abdel Malik to say a few words. Go ahead, dear colleague.
Merci beaucoup, Président. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellences, chers collègues, chers amis, c'est avec plaisir et un profond sens de responsabilité que je me joins à vous aujourd'hui en portant le mandat du groupe consultatif des gouvernements locaux et régionaux auprès du secrétaire général des Nations Unies. Les travaux du groupe consultatif reposaient sur une conviction claire. Les gouvernements locaux et régionaux ne sont pas seulement des parties prenantes périphériques des affaires multilatérales, nous sommes des gouvernements porteurs de mandats démocratiques et de responsabilités publiques. Et nous jouons un rôle direct dans la traduction des engagements mondiaux en changement concret dans la vie quotidienne des populations. L'héritage politique du groupe consultatif réside dans sa capacité à avoir fait passer cette reconnaissance du registre de l'aspiration à celui du débat institutionnel. Il a créé un canal direct entre le secrétaire général, les gouvernements nationaux et le collectif auto-organisé des gouvernements locaux et régionaux. Il a réuni des dirigeants autour d'un message commun. Les défis mondiaux ne peuvent être relevés efficacement sans les gouvernements les plus proches des communautés. Cet héritage est aujourd'hui plus important que jamais. Nous nous réunissons dans un contexte de fragmentation géopolitique, de multiplication des conflits et de polarisation croissante. Les droits institutionnels, la coopération multilatérale et les normes qui sous-tendent l'action collective sont de plus en plus remis en cause. Dans le même temps, les Nations Unies connaissent un processus de réforme profond, alors que la communauté internationale commence à définir l'horizon qui succédera à 2030. Il ne s'agit donc pas simplement d'un moment d'ajustement institutionnel, il s'agit d'un choix politique. La réponse aux défis actuels ne peut être moins de multilatéralisme, elle doit être davantage de multilatéralisme. Un multilatéralisme renouvelé depuis les territoires, capable de relier la prise de décision internationale aux réalités, aux capacités, aux institutions démocratiques locales et régionales. À travers la stratégie globale élaborée par le groupe consultatif, ainsi que le rapport du secrétaire général à l'Assemblée générale, nourri par ces travaux, nous avons démontré que la participation collective de notre collectif auto-organisé des gouvernements locaux et régionaux rend le multilatéralisme davantage un réseau plus inclusif et plus efficace. Le rapport a également défini une voie d'action concrète. Il appelle à une participation plus structurée, permanente et différenciée des gouvernements locaux et régionaux dans l'ensemble du système des Nations Unies. Il appelle à un dialogue politique renforcé avec les États membres et à une participation accrue aux processus intergouvernementaux. Ces recommandations doivent désormais guider notre stratégie collective. Elles doivent être portées par la Global Task Force et traduites en un cadre d'action commun, notamment à travers la poursuite du groupe consultatif en tant qu'organe permanent du Conseil auprès du prochain secrétaire général des Nations Unies. Notre message est clair. Les gouvernements locaux et régionaux sont prêts à être des partenaires de la réforme, non seulement pour mettre en œuvre les décisions mondiales, mais aussi pour contribuer et les façonner. À un moment où la prévention des conflits doit retrouver une place centrale dans la coopération internationale, nous apportons l'expérience des territoires et la capacité quotidienne de soutenir le dialogue, de protéger la cohésion sociale, de construire la confiance et de maintenir les communautés unies. Notre responsabilité est désormais de faire de cette ouverture une composante permanente du système multilatéral. Je vous remercie, chers collègues. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And I would like to give the floor to the president of the Open Society Foundation, who I met this morning, and it was a great honor and a pleasure. And I'm very curious to know how she will tell her beautiful story to this General Assembly. Dear Binifer Nodroji, please go ahead. Binifer.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Binifer Nodroji, and I'm the head of an organization, a philanthropy called Open Society Foundations. We've worked a lot over the years, over the last 50 years of our existence, around international human rights and humanitarian standards. And everywhere we see now those standards being breached and putting into question is the universalism of our common humanity in question. And it's very inspiring to come here and just see a reassertion of the fact that we all rise together or we all sink together. And the way you are speaking, what I feel is you are the future, and the future is local. And this local multilateralism and this space to connect, to me, is really critical. I see that this is where the social contract between citizen and state is being manifested and delivered. Societies are built from the ground up through inclusive, community-centered action in places where people live. And this work sits at the very core of what my organization's mandate is. Our role at Open Society Foundations is to support your work that promotes human rights, equity, and justice, to back local governments and civil society as partners so they can co-create solutions rather than have them imposed, to strengthen community engagement, to advance rights-based approaches, and to help embed equity into the way public safety is designed. Open Society's support rests on a simple conviction that has guided us for a long time, that public safety is increasingly a key concern in cities, but the solutions must be rooted in justice, in equity, in human rights, not just in enforcement. Enforcement can suppress the symptoms of insecurity, but only justice and inclusion can reach its causes. And cities, increasingly, are where that conviction is being put into practice. And all of you are uniquely positioned to be leaders. You are most close to the communities. You manage frontline services that shape daily life and safety. Policing, yes, of course, but also social services and urban planning to foster social cohesion. What I see here is a group of people who are together, bringing together local knowledge, data, and partnerships to respond quickly in ways that fit the specific reality on the ground for you. And that matters, because the challenges that cities face today, they're complex, and they don't yield to force alone. And even the types of challenges are different. Organized crime reshaping life in parts of Latin America, gender-based violence that cuts across urban settings everywhere, and the exclusion and frustration of young people in the fast-growing cities in Africa. Each of these calls for prevention, for social policy, for the patient work of building trust, not simply for more police. And local governments are actually responding with real innovation. We see it in violence prevention strategies and governance reforms taking place in Colombia and Mexico. We see it in community-based safety initiatives and multi-stakeholder partnerships being forged in Kenya and Nigeria. These are not theories. People are working out models that actually deliver, even in difficult conditions. And what runs through all of them is building trust. Effective public safety depends in the end on the relationship with communities and the institutions that are meant to serve them. And in an era where the social contract between citizen and state is now fraying, that relationship has to be rebuilt through accountability, through genuine participation, and through service delivery that leaves no one out. This is the hardest and most necessary, precisely where trust has been broken. And this meeting to me is so important because it does the next thing that's needed, which is to connect all of us so we can listen and learn from each other. We can exchange across region. In some places, people have strikingly similar challenges, and they can learn from each other, so that what works in one place, it can travel and take root in another place, while still staying grounded in local realities. That's also why the UCLG Peace Prize finalists matter so much, because they inspire us. But not only do they inspire us, they offer us concrete, tested examples of how local leadership, innovation, and community partnership can deliver real and measurable improvements. I want to acknowledge them and thank them for the example that they set. So let me close simply by saying, you are really the future for us in what you can build. The work and the efforts you are doing are really inspiring. And so I wish you well in any way that Open Society Foundations can, in tangible ways, either through financial support, expertise, connection. We are here and committed to do that. So as you take your work back to your own cities and communities, I hope there's one idea you take from today, and that is that sustainable peace is built locally. And keeping human rights and dignity at the center of that work is a foundation for lasting public safety. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Then I would like to give the floor to David Peregli, Director General for the 2030 Agenda of the Spanish government. Where are you? Oh, there he is. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear UCLA participants. It is a pleasure to share this meeting adding a country government point of view, in that case, our Spanish government. Moreover, it's a unique opportunity to share the pure essence of the SDGs and the public services that you are start discussing in this Congress. As the very pure debate of public goods like peace, clean air, development for all, gender equality that we are work for, either are public services or either are sustainable development goals. They are based, as they was just mentioned, in the human rights dignity, in the pure essence of international law, and the system to work together and to work for the humanity. This is something not to forget because we are in a very difficult moment. Even in this 2026, full of unexpected events, conflict and chaos, even suffering a genocide in Palestine, it's clear either we continue to promote international agreements such as the 2030 Agenda or the urban agenda or the agenda of the services for the municipalities, or we will be suffering a lot. We are now just suffering climate change or even development for a few people, not for everybody. So the old 2030 Agenda claim, leave no one behind, makes much more sense than even before, because it includes all of us, no matter which country, which city, which population we are living. And this is very important, the universal tax of the 2030 Agenda and all the international agenda of the United Nations system. Of course, there is a lot of differences among us. There is a lot of differences between governments of states and governments of the cities. There is a lot of differences between countries and regions and continents, of course. We know that. And this is also one thing that we need to tackle in the future. But now the very system of the multilateralism is into question. The same sense of vulnerability is different, but unique. We are now vulnerable, even if we are part from a different situation of unjust situation in the past, but now all the countries, we are suffering the same. So we need to multiply our effort for the SDGs implementation. So how to start thinking about the Beyond 2030 Horizon debate, we're supposed to start right now. First, beginning, we must continue working in implementation of the 2030 Agenda to expand the SDGs with local activities. For this reason, the government of Spain has just approved our second new sustainable development strategy as a roadmap with 100 actions that go beyond the SDGs implementation with localized actions. That means that working with universal values, but adapting to the level of Spain, to the level of the regions, and to the level of municipalities, and working all together, because it's also one important message. We cannot do it only governments, but also with civil society, universities, companies, and especially with regions and local governments. We are all the same tax, and we need to work together. It's not just localizing from the top of the state to the municipality, that's working together, because we need to work together in a more horizontal way. And in Spain, we are trying to do as much as we can, because it's something like it's in our DNA, with a lot of things to do in the future, with, of course, challenges, but it's something that we need to do for the SDGs and for the very pure essence of our governance that is based in the values that we were talking about. Our new strategy is also based in trying to contribute to the local, to the international level on public policies, because the most important thing that we are doing is SDGs. They are a public roadmap. It's a public roadmap for cities, also for regions, just to adapt, but also work for the people. Working for housing, that is one of the most important things in the future and now in the present for all the people living in the world, as we see it in Baku in the World Urban Forum. Also with a general focus on feminist care rooted in the local policies of each area and with policy coherence, that they are something that we are trying to do in Spain. So today, for instance, we launched a new funding for care policies for elderly people, and it's just very needed for everybody. Second, we need the post-2030 agenda topics. We need to start working with adaptation, and you, local and regional government, they are one actor essential for this task. So, third, and just closing, we need all together. So we count on you and the local and regional government, count on the government of Spain and other governments to work together. We count also on the civil society efforts. We can also on the universities and the companies that they are on this side. It's not just for granted. If we don't work it, maybe we don't see a better future or a better present. So we need together with values and the 2030 agenda continue doing a very good roadmap to work together with local adaptation. We count on you.
Thank you very much, David. Carry on, I would say. Then I would like to give the floor to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons, Mrs. Paula Gavira Betancourt. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, Excellencies, distinguished representatives. It is an honor to address you at this UCLG World Congress, a moment where local and regional leadership sets direction for the years ahead. And today I would like to focus on a global challenge with profound, deeply local consequences, internal displacement, and your central role in addressing it. We are facing record levels of internal displacement. More than 82.2 million people are displaced within their own countries by conflict, by violence, by disasters, and the adverse effects of climate change. Yet, this is not only a global crisis, it is a local reality. Most internally displaced persons are displaced within or to cities. They settle in neighborhoods already under pressure. They depend on services that were never designed for sudden population growth. And when they arrive, they turn first to you, to local authorities, not to national governments and not to the international system. You are the first responders, and long after humanitarian actors are gone, you remain. Internally displaced people are, first and foremost, residents of your cities. They are citizens entitled to enjoy urban life and public services on an equal basis with others. At the same time, they face specific challenges because they were forced to flee. A mother cannot enroll her child in school because she lost her identity documents while escaping violence. A family cannot access healthcare because the documents needed to prove their identity can only be replaced in a town that no longer exists. A young person is denied employment because they are perceived as an outsider, as a threat. A household that fled with nothing lives on the margins of the city, far from opportunities, and under constant threat of eviction. An internally displaced person cannot vote in local elections because the law ties political participation to a place they no longer live. So addressing these challenges cannot be limited to supporting return. It must also include supporting integration where people currently live. This requires a careful balance, I understand, responding to specific needs of displaced people while ensuring that policies and services strengthen inclusion and benefit all residents. And while displacement undoubtedly presents challenges, we should not lose sight of opportunities. Around the world, where inclusion has been managed well in many of your cities, displaced people have filled labor shortages, started businesses, strengthened local economies, and enriched community life. These outcomes not happen by chance. They happen when cities adopt policies that unlock people's potential. Even with limited resources, local governments are actually partnering with public and private employers to create jobs, developing safeguards against forced evictions, integrating displacement into urban planning, and creating spaces for displaced communities to participate in local decision-making. This is the shift we need to see displacement not only as a crisis to manage, but as an opportunity to strengthen the social cohesion, to spur innovation, and to build more resilient cities. And this vision resonates strongly with the CARE principle that has emerged throughout your discussions on the local social covenant. CARE as a public responsibility, CARE as embedded in policy, in planning, in service delivery. But let me be clear, local governments cannot and should not carry this responsibility alone. National governments, international organizations, and development banks must do more. They must provide direct and predictable funding. They must invest in local systems. As you shape your agenda for the next years, let me conclude with 3 priorities that I suggest. First, integrate internal displacement into local and regional planning. Second, partner with displaced communities because durable solutions are built with them, not for them. And third, bring your voices to the global stage. The strength of UCLG lies in its connection to reality. Use the strength to ensure local perspectives shape national and international decisions, especially as we look beyond 2030. And at a time when multilateralism is under strain, local governments remind us that cooperation still works, solidarity still matters, and practical solutions are still possible. The future of millions of internally displaced people will not be determined by national capitals or international conference rooms. It will be determined in cities, cities that choose inclusion over exclusion, policies that connect humanitarian with development, partnerships that place local and regional leaders at the center of solutions. I look forward to continue engaging with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. So those were the contributions to the dialogue. Now I'll give the floor to some respondents from the advisory group, to begin with my dear friend and colleague Paola Pabon, Prefect of Pichincha Province and Vice President of UCLG for the Forum of Regions. Go ahead.
Gracias, Presidente. Queridos colegas, nos reunimos en un momento decisivo para el multilateralismo, pero también decisivo para nuestra organización. Mientras hablamos, el mundo enfrenta el mayor número de conflictos armados desde el final de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Más de 120 millones de personas han sido desplazadas forzosamente de sus hogares y el gasto militar mundial superó los 2,7 billones de dólares en el 2025. Mientras millones de personas siguen sin accesos a servicios básicos, a vivienda, a salud o a cuidados. Al mismo tiempo, observamos señales preocupantes del debilitamiento del sistema multilateral, reducción de aportes financieros a organismos internacionales, cuestionamiento de los acuerdos globales, repliegues nacionalistas y crecientes dificultades para alcanzar consensos frente a estos desafíos que por definición son comunes. Por eso, defender el multilateralismo no es defender la burocracia internacional, es defender la posibilidad de actuar colectivamente frente a los desafíos de nuestro tiempo. Quiero en este momento reaccionar a dos oradoras, especialmente a la presidenta de la Fundación Open Society, así como a Paula Gaviria, relatora especial de Naciones Unidas. La paz, como ustedes lo señalan, no es únicamente la ausencia de la guerra. Tenemos que ampliar la comprensión de lo que significa la paz en nuestros territorios. La paz tiene que ser la construcción permanente de esas relaciones justas. Y desde los territorios sabemos que la ausencia de cuidados también es violencia. Cuando una mujer debe sostener sola la reproducción de la vida, también es violencia. Cuando una familia no accede a agua, también es violencia. Cuando una comunidad pierde sus medios de vida por la crisis climática, pierde la paz. Cuando los jóvenes no encuentran oportunidades, generamos más desigualdad. Y allí también hay formas de guerra. Una democracia no puede ser incompleta. No puede existir paz duradera donde se destruyen los bienes comunes que sostienen la vida. Por eso, celebramos los avances alcanzados junto a Naciones Unidas durante estos años. La adopción de la Acción 55 del Pacto para el Futuro, la creación del Grupo Asesor del Secretario General sobre Gobiernos Locales y Regionales y el debate en curso para consolidar una participación más estructurada de los territorios dentro de ese sistema multilateral. Los gobiernos locales y regionales no somos los observadores de la crisis global, somos quienes estamos en primera línea, garantizando el agua, la movilidad, la vivienda, el cuidado, la cohesión social y la convivencia democrática. Somos quienes transformamos los acuerdos internacionales en realidades concretas para las personas. Por eso, desde Pichincha, defendemos un multilateralismo renovado, más democrático, más territorial, que defiende la vida por sobre nuestra gente. Quiero cerrar con un ejemplo doloroso. Nosotros estamos enfrentando una crisis de violencia como país frente al crimen organizado. 51 muertes violentas por cada 100,000 habitantes. Y el dato que les daría podría ser uno más de los periódicos y de la Crónica Roja. Esta semana hubo 2 sicariatos que sacudieron al país, principalmente porque quienes cometieron el delito fueron niños que no llegaban a los 15 años. No podemos hablar de paz en esas condiciones en nuestros territorios. UNICEF documentó entre el 2019 y 2024 en el Ecuador el crecimiento de los homicidios de niños por sobre el 600%. Por eso estamos convencidos que el multilateralismo es necesario, pero un multilateralismo que cambie las desigualdades estructurales en nuestros territorios. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Paula. The news from your country was terrible indeed this week. Could I give the floor, who would have thought that I would ever do that here, to Sharon Dijksma, the mayor of Utrecht. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thanks, Jan. Dear colleagues, it is a pleasure to join you today for this most important discussion. And I have to say I had the privilege of serving at the UN Secretary General's Advisory Group on Local and Regional Governments, joined with at least Fatima too today, and I see a lot of familiar faces all around. And that invitation to be part of a group of mayors and also governors that advised Guterres on the future role of local and regional governments within the United Nations system, that was truly significant. It reflected actually a growing recognition that many of today's global challenges are experienced locally, and that many of the solutions will ultimately depend on local action. And what struck me the most was not only the recognition of the role of cities and regions, but also the willingness within the UN system to actually reflect on how multilateralism itself needs to evolve. And that is because the reality is clear. The ambitions of the 2030 agenda, they remain as important as ever, but the progress is not so good. And it is actually falling behind seriously. And we know, all of us, that many of these goals can only be achieved through action at the local level. And that was exactly the starting point of our work, not how local governments can better implement global agendas, but how global governments can better connect with the realities of people's daily lives. And that conversation, my friends, that is really far from over. So if we zoom in now at the situation of today, I am both optimistic, that's also part of my character, but also concerned. Because at one hand, I am encouraged by the progress that has been made since the advisory group presented its recommendations. We are seeing concrete follow-up within the UN system, including discussions on the reform of ECOSOC and the high-level political forum. And there is a growing recognition that local and regional governments need a more structured place within the multilateral system. And it would also be good to acknowledge the important work of UCLG and the Global Task Force, because I have to say this progress builds on years of collective effort to strengthen the local voice in global governance. And Emilia, I think that we should thank you also for all the great work you have done behind the scenes with your team and all the people. Equally encouraging is the decision to continue the advisory group as a so-called political interlocution mechanism between local and regional governments and the UN. And I think that is an important message. This was not a one-off consultation, but the beginning of a longer-term partnership. And on the other hand, there is still a lot of serious work to do. Around the world, too many people still do not experience the benefits of the commitments world leaders make. And the real test for the post-2030 agenda will therefore not be whether we can agree on a new framework. The real test will be whether international cooperation and multilateralism becomes more capable of improving people's lives, daily lives, whether they can find an affordable home, whether young people see opportunities for the future, whether public services are accessible and reliable, whether women and girls can participate equally and safely in society. And this is why, as we look beyond 2030, I believe we should focus on two things. And I would conclude with that. First, we need to make delivery our starting point. Global commitments only matter if they lead to visible improvements in people's everyday lives. And second, local and regional governments must help to shape what comes next. Not because we are seeking recognition, but because this is where global ambitions meet reality. And if there is one lesson that we could take from the advisory group, that is that the future of multilateralism depends on its ability to connect global ambition with local action. Because ultimately, I would say, people will not judge our success by what we can agree in New York, but they will judge it by what it changes in their communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Then I would like to give the floor to the mayor of Amman, my dear colleague Youssef Al-Shawarbe.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and allow me to speak in Arabic. مساء الخير جميعا، الحضور الكرام، الزملاء رؤساء البلديات. يطيب لي أن أتوجه بالشكر إلى مدينة طنجة وإلى المملكة المغربية الشقيقة على استضافة هذه الدورة من مؤتمرنا العالمي المنعقدة تحت شعار الجيل الجديد من الخدمات العامة المحلية الشاملة. وتتزامن أعمالنا اليوم مع اليوم العالمي للخدمة العامة الذي تحتفي به الأمم المتحدة في 23 من حزيران من كل عام، ما يمنح هذا اللقاء بعدا إضافيا. فحديثنا عن التعددية المحلية من أجل السلام يرتبط مباشرة بجوهر الخدمة العامة، إذ أن آلاف العاملين في بلدياتنا وإداراتنا المحلية هم من يحولون قيم التضامن والإنصاف والكرامة إلى واقع يومي يلمسه المواطنون في حياتهم. أشارك في هذا الحوار باسم مدينة عمان وبصفتي عضواً في المجموعة الاستشارية للإدارات المحلية والإقليمية لدى الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، وبصفة عمان رئيساً مشاركاً لمنظمة المدن المتحدة والإدارات المحلية لمنطقة الشرق الأوسط وغرب آسيا. وهذا الموقع يحملنا مسؤولية مضاعفة أن نتحدث عن تجربتنا بصراحة، وأن نربطها بما يعنيه السلام والإدماج والتنمية لمدينة تقع في قلب منطقة لا تزال تواجه تحديات جيوسياسية وإنسانية معقدة. وإذ نحمل اليوم كأعضاء في المجموعة الاستشارية توصيات الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة المقدمة إلى الجمعية العامة عام 2025، فإن عمان تؤكد أن جوهر هذه التوصيات لا يكتمل دون ترسيخ مبدأ الحوكمة متعددة المستويات. فاللامركزية لا تقاس بعدد الصلاحيات المنقولة إلى البلديات فحسب، بل بمدى توافق هذه الصلاحيات مع الموارد والإمكانيات المتاحة لها فعلياً. وتترجم عمان هذا الالتزام من خلال انخراطها في فضاءات تعددية متعددة ومتكاملة من منظمتنا العالمية UCLG وفرعها الإقليمي UCLG ميوا، وصولاً إلى مجلس قيادة العمداء بشأن الهجرة. وتؤمن عمان بأن قيمة التعددية المحلية تنبع من قرب الحكومات المحلية من الناس وقدرتها على ترجمة السياسات العالمية إلى حلول ملموسة في الحياة اليومية. تقع عمان في منطقة عاشت وما تزال تعيش تحديات النزوح والتوترات الإقليمية المتلاحقة، ومنذ سنوات استوعبت المدينة ملايين من اللاجئين والنازحين دون أن تتوقف عن تقديم الخدمات الأساسية: المياه والنقل والصحة والتعليم والمساحات العامة. وهذه التجربة علمتنا أن الاستقرار المحلي ليس نتيجة للتنمية فحسب، بل شرط سابق لها. فالمدن هي الخط الأول في إدارة آثار الأزمات والنزوح والتوترات الاجتماعية، وهي أيضا الخط الأول في بناء الثقة ومنع النزاعات والحفاظ على التماسك المجتمعي. من هذا الموقع نؤكد أن الإدماج خيار سياسات يومية في التخطيط الحضري الذي يراعي الفئات الأكثر هشاشة، وفي تصميم الخدمات بما يضمن وصولها الجميع دون تمييز، وفي بناء آليات حوار محلي تمتص التوترات قبل أن تتحول إلى نزاعات. وهذا في تقدير عمان هو جوهر منع النزاعات بمعناه المحلي. ثقة تبنى تدريجيا في الحي والمدرسة والمرفق العام قبل أن تختبر في لحظة الأزمة. وتأتي مشاركتنا اليوم في سياق دورة سياسية مكثفة تجمع عبر مسار 100 يوم من التعددية المحلية محطات مثل المنتدى السياسي الرفيع المستوى ومراجعة الهدف 11 والمراجعة المتوسطة للأجندة الحضارية الجديدة ومنتدى المدن العالمي في باكو لتصل إلى محطتها السياسية هنا في طنجة. وتساهم عمان في هذا المسار من خلال انخراطها في مبادرة العد التنازلي للمدن نحو 2030، حيث نعمل على توثيق الحلول المحلية القابلة للقياس والتوسع مع التمييز الدقيق بين ما تحقق فعليا وما يبقى تحديا قائما. ولذلك تنضم عمان إلى زملائها في التأكيد على ضرورة الانتقال من النظر إلى الإدارات المحلية والإقليمية كجهات منفذة فقط إلى الاعتراف بها كمستوى حوكمي أساسي في تصميم أي نظام تعددي متجدد. ونعتبر وثيقة نحن المدن خطوة ضرورية في هذا الاتجاه، ونؤكد دعمنا لمسار يمنح هذا التوجه طابعا دائما وبنيويا في منظومة الأمم المتحدة تماشيا مع توصيات الأمين العام المقدمة للجمعية العامة في تموز 2025. في ختام كلمتي أجدد التزام أمانة عمان الكبرى الراسخ بالعمل الجماعي ضمن منظومتنا العالمية وبدعم كل مسعى يعزز التعددية المحلية ويكرس السلام من خلال المدن، وآمل أن تفضي أعمال هذا المؤتمر إلى ميثاق بلدي عالمي جريء يعيد رسم علاقة الحكومات المحلية بمنظومة الحوكمة الدولية على أسس التكافؤ والمشاركة الحقيقية، وتؤكد عمان أن الجيل الجديد من الخدمات العامة الذي يحتفي به هذا المؤتمر لن يكتمل من دون مدن قادرة على الاحتواء والإنصاف وصون السلم الاجتماعي، وأن السلام يبنى أولا في الشارع وفي الحي وفي المدينة. شكرا لكم. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague of Amman. I give the floor now to the Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the privilege to continue facilitating the discussions of this high-level panel. It is the first time I was sharing with colleagues earlier this morning during the Executive Bureau that we took the step to bring these kind of dialogues to the heart of our governing bodies. And I felt a bit nervous about it, but I think it's working really well. And I am very pleased to see how the different partnerships that we have, the different actors, are so well fine-tuned with our own membership. If you look around this room, a very good representation of the world is here. A world that is going through very trying times, and where progress is being made in the way that we articulate decision-making and that we allow people to participate and that we update the kind of actors that take decisions in global issues, but it might not be going fast enough. The mayor was just saying to me he was able to welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations to his city, and he took the time to have a private talk with our president of our executive presidency. And he kept talking about the advisory group, about the good work that had been done in the advisory group. And you have heard some of the members, the mayor of Utrecht, Paola Pavón, the chair of the advisory group, the president of Nouakchott, the mayor of Amman, so many. We have done great progress, but it does stay a little bit with the secretariat of the system. So it is really important for us that the UN Secretary General has presented this report to the General Assembly. It was a big celebration, and my two colleagues who are going to take the floor here are very much part and parcel of that celebration. It is meaningful. We know what we achieved. We are not, undermining it. But, yeah, when it is about asking member states to make the difference, that's proving quite challenging. So I'm very grateful we have with us the government of Spain, who is working hard with us on this ECOSOC reform and the high-level political forum. We have the government of Uruguay with us. We have the governments of Cameroon. You will see many national governments joining us throughout these days. It remains tough, and we are not really where we want to be. I don't want this to sound too pessimistic. It's just realistic, I think, because we need to determine what our next step needs to be. What is the next strategy? And so I'm very happy to have with us two of the founding members and key organizations that are part of the Global Task Force, who has committed to continue working with the format of the advisory group, and that has sent to the UN Secretary General a whole roadmap of what we are planning to do, and the ECOSOC reform is part of that. Allow me now to give the floor to Gino van Beging, the Secretary General of ICLEI Local Government for Sustainability, one of those networks like us like United Cities and local governments, those independent organizations of local and regional governments that know what municipalism feels like. Thank you very much, Gino. It's a great pleasure to have you joining our General Assembly. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and thank you very much, Mayor Van Zaan, President of UCLG. Your Excellencies, mayors, governors, and distinguished local leaders, it's a profound honor for me to speak here before the General Assembly of UCLG in Tangier in the Kingdom of Morocco. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, we meet at a moment of genuine alarm. The institutions that have underpinned peace and global cooperation are under serious strain. We experience that climate change is compounding deep inequalities. We are experiencing and encounter strong rising nationalism. And we live in societies that are finding it harder to communicate across differences. These crises, individually, would each demand our full attention. But together, they threaten global peace. They represent the most pressing call for action that humanity has ever faced. And we cannot give up hope, not as a diplomatic formality, but as a strategic necessity. Hope and local action for a better future is the only thing that can mobilize and scale the kind of movement that we need. And I'm very pleased to see that the room here is full of it. To ICLEI, local and regional governments are not a means to an end. They, you, constitute the answer to some of the most pressing challenges of our time. You and your administrations have the most direct and outsized impact on the daily lives of your residents. Particularly in the face of climate change, you are not waiting for permission to act. You help building seawalls, replant urban forests, redesign mobility systems, and rewrite social contracts. And often you do that without the adequate resources, financially, human resources, often also without the legal mandates, and very often without the formal recognition in global frameworks. In addition, no other level of government can claim the unique ability to rebuild our people's trust in institutions through addressing inequality in concrete ways. By making it easier for everyday people to live, contribute, and be heard in our communities, you as local governments close the distance between political decisions and the people those decisions are affecting. What gives me confidence is what I see every day through ICLEI's network of more than 2,500 local and subnational governments, as well as through our cooperation with our sister organization, UCLG. Cities reduce emissions not because they were told to, but because clean air and livable streets are what residents are demanding. Municipalities in the Global South build circular economy systems that create jobs and keep communities from becoming an afterthought. Local governments use data and community participation to make decisions that are and will be more just, more durable, than anything imposed from above. But I also want to be honest, as Amelia said, about what is not working. Local governments are expected to implement the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the biodiversity framework, without the necessary legal authority, the required financial resources, or the formal recognition to do so at scale. National governments sign commitments that land on the desks of mayors who had no seat at that table. And this must change, not as a favor to local regional governments, but because the global system cannot achieve what it promises without them. Climate targets will not be met without cities. Public trust will not be rebuilt without the institutions that people can actually reach. ICLEI stands with UCLG in calling for local multilateralism and a multi-level governance as a practice, not as a principle. Direct access to climate finance, formal inclusion in the design of NDCs and national climate plans, legal frameworks that empower subnational governments. We meet today at the UN Public Service Day, and that's not a coincidence. It's a reminder that government exists to serve people, and that local governments and regional governments are where that service is most directly felt and need to be taken on. To you, the city planners, public health officers, climate adaptation teams, you are the ones who turn policy into pavement, into clean water, into a child arriving safely at school. Public service is an act of faith in collective life, and that faith matters more than ever. I congratulate UCLG and the city of Tangier for hosting this Congress. We at ICLEI will continue to exercise our leadership where we can within the Global Task Force together with UCLG and other partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gino. I sometimes feel that you triggered me with this act of faith. It's an act of faith in humanity. It's an act of hope. It is true. And sometimes it does feel a bit like a miracle that we managed to get these like-minded people in very different circumstances, from very different perspectives, try to serve people and communities. So thank you very much for reminding us what we want to achieve with that seat at the table. It's not for us, it's not for our organizations, it's to actually make a difference. So that's why I'm so grateful that all our partners are here today. And going back to what the president of the Open Society Foundation was saying earlier on, I mean, it's constructed in our cities. The future is constructed there. Lucy Slack, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. The Commonwealth Local Government Forum is one of these special animals in our ecosystem that also includes ministers and governments of the Commonwealth. And we know really well what it is to feel coming closer to the target and then again see how the target goes further away. Lucy, your thoughts on how we need to look at this strategy post 2030. Yeah? We belong to the group of people that still believes multilateralism is meaningful. So what is next there? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Amelia. Thanks to UCLG, and it's a real honor to have a chance to say just a few words in this session of the Congress. Thank you for that. And thank you for saying that we're one of the organizations that is still here and still has hope. And I think that coming to this meeting, coming to the UCLG Congress, joining local government mayors, local government leaders, people who are working in the local government space, does really give you a sense of community, and it does really give you a sense of why we're coming together, and we continue to kind of make the case for local government's role as an actor in development. And I think we should maybe just recall, and other colleagues have said this, how important local government is, and particularly local service delivery is. And the theme of the conference, of course, is very much around service delivery. And local government is really at the heart of that delivery of the services that really meet the everyday needs of citizens. And that contract between local government and society is really what local democracy and what many of the mayors in this room, it's really what everybody's about. And it's really about how we build a sense of trust between the service deliverers and the users of those services. And mayors are right at the heart of that, and we've heard other colleagues speak a little bit to this. But we've also heard that, you know, that democratic process is very much under threat. We see challenges from populist movements, from conflict, but also, I think, from rapid movement of people. We talk about displacement, but also just rapid urbanization in many of our cities, and the informality that comes with often that rapid urbanization. And I think with UCLG, CLGF, the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments, it's very important that we put local democracy at the heart of that and building that democratic resilience in our societies in order to continue to be able to respond to the needs of our local communities. Because that is really about that contract. It is about that trust that we build with societies and with people to ensure peaceful communities. And in many ways, that is the segment into why we're all here as part of the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments, and possibly why it's been such a long journey for us. And as Amelia said, CLGF is an organization which quite uniquely brings together ministries of local governments as well as local government. And I do think we need to think much more about that interrelationship. And I think we're already seeing the environment getting much more complex for mayors in terms of leading in cities, because it isn't just a job for one. It's not just a job for city governments. It's not just a job for governments or civil society. It really does need a different kind of governance. And I think that that really needs to be at the heart of what we're pushing for. And the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments has been quite unique, I think, in bringing together a strong voice for local government and really amplifying some very core messages into the UN and into the multilateral system. And as Amelia has said, as others have said, I think we've made excellent progress. We've talked a little bit about the Secretary General's Advisory Committee, the impact that that has had. But it's clear that we have to go further. But we can only go further if we go together. And I really do feel that this year is a little bit of a, maybe not a make or break year, but it really is a crucial year for us as a community of organizations seeking to really put local governments into the heart of that decision-making process, to change up the status of local government in the context of the multilateral system. We have our own multilateral system. We want to bring that into the wider global multilateral system. And I think looking at what comes ahead, we have the high-level political forum looking specifically at SDG 11. That's very critical for local government. It's such a core convening goal for us and is something that really does demonstrate very clearly how many of the goals really need to come through cities. I think it's about 65% of all of the goals are going to require action at the local level. We see 10-year review of the new urban agenda. And we also know that Article 55, or we hope that Article 55 will be part of the negotiations going forward as part of the UN reform. And maybe just to close, I think as a global community, I think we've come a really long way. I think we need to continue to come together, continue to share a strong message, but we also need to really use our political mandate to reach out and to build partnerships with other parts of government and with other sectors and other organizations that can really support us in that process. And I think this session of the Assembly really exemplifies that very clearly, how we really need to kind of build, of course, our own community and our own voice as the global task force, but we also need to understand that we need to work with partners and supporters and advocates as we seek to make this transition.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And the issue of which part of government do we talk to is an issue, right? I mean, because those of us that were at the World Urban Forum, I mean, there are parts of government there, but they might not be necessarily the one that we need to address to change things. And in our collaboration with the Director General for the 2030 Agenda of Spain, we are also experiencing how different parts of different governments react in diverse manners. I do think that there is a work that we need to do with local government ministers that might not necessarily mirror the conversation that we need to have internationally, but that will support our case on the type of policy changes that we want to push for. And there is a didactic work there that we have been discussing within the Global Task Force, but I think can be really meaningful. So now allow me to give the floor to Daniel Friedman, the Program Director for Peace in Our Cities, one of the very critical areas of our World Organization, as the Mayor of The Hague was saying before. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary General, to UCLG, to our hosts here in Morocco, and to everybody present from city governments, from civil society, philanthropy, and international organizations who are working to build safe and sustainable cities. My name is Daniel Friedman. I'm a member of the Peace in Our Cities Secretariat. Peace in Our Cities is a global network and movement of nearly 100 city governments, as well as international organizations, networks, and local civil society partners dedicated to reducing urban violence and promoting safety through approaches grounded in human rights, inclusion, and in evidence. We were proud to help author the Peace Local Social Covenant Letter, underscoring the essential role that city and local leaders play in reducing violence. And across the board, we see how cities are how we will eventually achieve sustainable development. I think this is something that everybody in the room is already acutely aware of, which is that cities must have an even more explicit role in both delivering and in crafting the post-2030 agenda. Traditional multilateralism cannot continue on its status quo. Several of us for the Peace in Our Cities Secretariat are based in New York, and we've had the opportunity to start engaging in some initial post-2030 conversations. And while we greatly appreciate the member states that are present and the engagement that is had, we also see member states oftentimes fail to learn from each other, failing to reach consensus. And we do see that much of the world and too much of the planet is devolving into conflict. But in many issue areas, including in our own focus of advancing peace, we see that cities are thriving. Through Peace in Our Cities, we work to identify solutions to urban violence, connect cities to one another, and directly share solutions, experiences of what works to stop violence, and sometimes we directly support our member cities in these efforts. And through this, we've seen and participated in solutions and approaches that has led cities to actually reach and oftentimes even surpass development targets at a time when so many seem off track at a global or a national level. We've seen cities within our network that have reduced violent crime by 60% or greater. And because of that, we believe that cities need to have a central role in multilateral processes post-2030, not only through existing systems, but through new systems in the post-2030 agenda that can leverage the agility and the flexibility that local governance has. Cities know and cities already understand that in the future of sustainable development, we need to increase the focus on all forms of violence. Most global deaths do not happen within conflict zones. They happen in our homes, our streets, our communities. And non-lethal violence is even more pervasive. It has especially acute gender components, and it's rarely fully captured in existing data. And while cities are at the front lines of this violence, many multilateral institutions are actually being pushed away from this more holistic or preventative approach, and many are under pressure to return to what they call core security concerns or job creation. There's actually a concern that we may backtrack on this front, which would be potentially harmful given the development impacts that all forms of violence can have. We should rather be expanding the peace and violence targets in sustainable development to better account for the violence that impacts cities and impacts urban communities. And cities will play an absolutely pivotal role in this. We were asked in our letter how we can collectively strengthen prevention-first approaches. And I would just note that prevention first approaches must be holistic, they must work across sectors, and that cities are made up of not just municipal leaders, but also of local civil society. They can partner in the delivery and create the partnerships that are necessary to achieve these goals. And for that reason, we will also urge a core role for civil society in partnerships with municipalities. And I just want to note, Amelia, you stated very well in your recent op-ed that global commitments must be anchored in local delivery. And with that in mind, we invite you to help craft a post-2030 agenda that more explicitly and centrally highlights the role that all of you here, that local leaders and civil leaders play in building peace and more sustainable development. There are, however, areas where the international and multilateral community can play a key role. For example, the draft outcome document states that we'll invest in mediation, early warning, social cohesion, and community-based prevention. These are all key areas where local communities are primed to lead, but where the multilateral system has expertise and resources to support. It's therefore critical to establish ambitious post-2030 targets that correspond to these needs. Cities never do this work in a vacuum or absent collaboration and community. So we now have the chance to build a global commitment steeped in the gravity and the community and exchange within and between cities.
Thank you.
Through networks like ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for rushing you. Sorry. But I do have a growing list of assembly members that are asking for the floor. And so I'm very concerned about the next session. But thank you very much to Peace in Our Cities for having been part of our Global Social Covenant and developing the letter around peace and conflict. It's very important for us to work together. So we very much look forward that these are going to be critical bases for the future of our work. In my list, I have the mayor of Ramallah, and I also have the mayor of North Minahasa in Indonesia, and we will take it from there. I think we will be able to take two more speakers if we all behave and can do shortly. Because we have one more session to go. Mayor of Ramallah, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening. I'm going to speak in Arabic. السيدات والسادة رئيس وأعضاء شبكة UCLG، زميلاتي وزملائي رؤساء البلديات والحكومات المحلية، يشرفني أن أخاطبكم اليوم باسم مدينة رام الله وفلسطين، وأن أشارك للمرة الأولى في مؤتمر العالمي UCLG بصفتي رئيساً لبلدية رام الله. أتحدث إليكم من مدينة تؤمن بدور الحكومة المحلية كقوة للتغيير والتنمية، لكنها تعمل في ظروف استثنائية فرضت عقود من الاحتلال وما يرافقه من قيود على الحركة والتخطيط والوصول إلى الموارد والأراضي. ورغم ذلك تواصلت المدن الفلسطينية أداء مسؤولياتها اليومية تجاه مواطنينها، وتستمر في تقديم الخدمات الأساسية وتعزيز التنمية المحلية والاستثمار في المستقبل وأهداف والأكثر استدامة ومرونة. إن ما يميز تجربة المدن الفلسطينية ليس فقط قدرتها على الصمود، بل قدرتها أيضا على النجاح. ففي ظل التحديات تمكنت بلديتنا من تطوير نموذج مبتكر في الإدارة المحلية والحكومة والتحويل الرقمي والاستدامة والمشاركة المجتمعية وتوطين أهداف التنمية المستدامة. بالنسبة لرام الله، تمثيل UCLG أكثر من مجرد شبكة دولية، فهي منصة تجمع مدن تواجه العديد من التحديات، من التغيير المناخي والنمو الحضري المتسارع والضغوط الاقتصادية والاجتماعية إلى الأزمات والنزاعات التي تشهدها منطقتنا. وقد شكلت UCLG شريكاً مهماً في بناء العلاقات المهنية وتبادل الخبرات وتعزيز الحضور المدن الفلسطينية في المحافل الدولية، كما ساهمت في خلق مساحات للحوار والتعلم والتعاون بين المدن الأعضاء. إن رام الله ملتزمة مواصلة دورها الفاعل داخل UCLG والمساهمة في المبادرات وتوسيع شبكة علاقات مع المدن الأعضاء، وإيمانا منا بأن التعاون بين المدن هو أهم أدوات التنمية والاستقرار في منطقتنا. إن المدن ليست ضحايا للأزمات فحسب، بل هي جزء من الحلول، وعندما تتعاون المدن وتتشارك المعرفة والخبرات فإنها تصبح أكثر قدرة على مواجهة التحديات العالمية وتعزز السلام والتنمية والعدالة. إن مستقبل العالم سيشكل في المدن. إن مستقبل العالم سيشكل في المدن، ولذلك فإن الاستثمار في الحكومات المحلية هو استثمار في الاستقرار والتنمية والازدهار. ختاما، وبصفتي رئيس جديد لبلدية رام الله، فإنني أتطلع أن أكون تلك السنوات القادمة مرحلة تعزيز حضور مدينتنا الدولي وتوسيع شراكاتنا مع المدن حول العالم وترسيخ دور نموذجي لمدينة فلسطينية تنجح وتبتكر وتبني الأمل رغم كل التحديات. شكرا لكم ولكم كل الاحترام. I made it short, Emilia. I made it short as possible.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the applause was longer than your speech. It's always a good sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, we're very honored and pleased to hear that Ramallah will continue to be the important member that our network has always considered your beautiful city. And we are convinced, and we know very well, because the former mayor of Ramallah, who has been our special envoy, also has taught us that, as you said, you are resilient and you are able to deliver. Allow me now to go to Indonesia, to the mayor of North Minahasa.
Thank you. First of all, I want to introduce my name is Joe Naganda. I'm a region mayor of North Minahasa, Indonesia. Excellency, distinguished member of UCLG, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the government and the people of North Minahasa Regency, Indonesia, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to UCLG for providing this important platform to share experience and strengthen local action for peace. It is a great honor for North Minahasa to be among the finalists of the UCLG Peace Prize. We are proud to present not only Indonesia but also the Asia-Pacific region in this global initiative promoting peace, tolerance, and social cohesion. North Minahasa has a diverse regency where people from different faith, cultures, and backgrounds live side by side. For us, diversity is not a challenge, it's a strength. However, peace does not happen automatically. It requires commitment, collaboration, and continuous investment in trust. Our peace initiative is built on 3 pillars: education and religious moderation, government support for religious communities, and continuous dialogue among all stakeholders. A key success has been the activity involvement of religious leaders. We regard them as a strategic partners in peace building because they are the trust by the community and understand local realities. Our commitment is not only reflected in politics, but also in concentrated investment. Ladies and gentlemen, for North Minahasa, peace is not only a social objective. It is also a foundation of sustainable development. Our experience demonstrates that when local government, religious leaders, communities, women, and young people work together, harmony becomes stronger and more sustainable. Peace is not merely a government agenda. It's become a shared responsibility of society. As local leaders, we have a duty to ensure that diversity becomes a source of strength rather than division. In an increase of polarized world, local government must continue to build bridges of dialogue, mutual respect, and cooperation. Allow me to conclude by expressing our deepest support local government in advancing peace and social cohesion. North Minahasa remaining committed to promoting tolerance, protecting diversity, empowering communities, and building an inclusive future where development and peace go hand in hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Mayor. And allow me now to go to the first Deputy Mayor of Cologne, Andreas Wolter. The floor is yours. After this, we will go ahead to the next session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Human rights are often discussed in international forums, but as we heard here, the real test happens in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our city halls. As a city, Cologne has both the duty and the opportunity to make human rights tangible in everyday life. This means protecting dignity, ensuring equality, and creating conditions in which every resident can participate fully and safely. On city levels, human rights are often violated in everyday service and policies and practices such as in housing, healthcare services, unequal treatment of migrants, racial profiling, public space and accessibility, or non-integration of refugees. But we can do it much more better, and we can turn the wheel. This is a big chance for the cities. At the local level, human rights translate into concrete policies, access to affordable housing, non-discriminatory schooling, healthcare, social service, and everyone, and meaningful inclusion of refugees and migrants. Cologne's rich history, which is bringing diversity and strengths we must build on in our local institutions. From public transport to cultural programs should reflect and reinforce the principles of the right to be everyone's to calls as a city home. The city can adopt clear anti-discrimination measures, support civic educational rights, and involve community groups in decision-making, investing in legal aid, language, and job training programs, and safe public spaces, protects vulnerable people, and strengthen social cohesion. So collaborative partnerships with NGOs, businesses, and neighborhoods initiatives are very helpful. Municipal leadership also means speaking out when rights are threatened. Cities can be places where human rights are not abstract idea, but lived reality, where access, respect, and dignity guide policy and practice. We, City as Cologne, is part of the Human Rights City campaign of UCLG, involving vulnerable groups like migrants, seniors, LGBTIQ, have their own committees in our city council and are represented in all committees as experts. And last but not least, we are fighting against nationalism, extremism in Cologne and worldwide. For example, also we support Dnipro in Ukraine in their fight for freedom in the Russian illegal war, contrary to international war. If countries want to steal something from their neighbors, we support the victims, not only in Ukraine, as well as in Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. I'm very pleased to share with you that we hope to be adopting the Global Charter Agenda on Human Rights in the City in this very Congress in our session of the World Council on the 25th, and that indeed human rights are very high on the agenda of this Congress. So very, very pleased to see that, and obviously the work done by Cologne and other cities joining our committee on social inclusion are partially to thank for that work. So with the permission of the chair that had to leave, allow me now to invite the General Assembly to support the strengthening the role of local and regional governments within the multilateral system. I can see from the interventions that we have seen that we do continue to have that mandate, so I'm grateful for that. And to recognize local public services, local democracy, and territorial cooperation as foundations for peace and social cohesion. If I don't see any other hands, I would take, we received this renewed mandate from you, and I am now very pleased to give the floor to Mayor Altai that is going to guide us through the next segment of this General Assembly. President, the floor is yours.
Değerli Genel Sekreterimize teşekkür ediyorum. Tüm konuşmacıları saygıyla selamlıyorum. Değerli meslektaşlarım, az önce yaptığımız tartışma bize barış, güven ve sosyal uyumun sürdürülebilir bir kolektif eylemi gerektirdiğini hatırlatıyor. Ancak yerel ve bölgesel yönetimlerin günümüzün zorluklarını tek başlarına çözemeyeceğini de biliyoruz. İster konut, iklim eylemi, halk sağlığı, gıda sistemleri, dijital dönüşümlü olsun, ister kamu hizmetlerinin geleceğinden bahsedelim. Bu zorlukların boyutu ve karmaşıklığı yeni bir işbirliği şeklinin çağrısıdır. Bunlar sektörler ve yönetişim düzeyleri arasında bilgi, inovasyon, finansman ve siyasi liderliği harekete geçirebilecek güçlü ortaklıklar gerektirmektedir. Bu görev süresi boyunca hareketimiz, ortak öncelikleri ilerletmek ve siyasi taahhütleri somut eyleme dönüştürmek için giderek daha fazla koalisyon ve ortaklıklarla çalışmıştır. Yerel sosyal sözleşme, anlamlı bir dönüşümün yalnızca ulaşmayı hedeflediğimiz sonuçlara değil, aynı zamanda bu hedefleri gerçekleştirmek üzere birlikte hareket edebilme kapasitemize de bağlı olduğunu kabul ederek bu deneyim üzerinden inşa edilmektedir. Bu anlamda inovasyon yalnızca yeni teknolojiler veya yeni araçlarla ilgili değildir. Aynı zamanda toplumlarımız için yeni işbirliği, öğrenme ve çözüm sunma yolları yaratmakla da ilgilidir. Aynı zamanda teknolojiye yatırım yaparken insanı ve kurumsal kapasiteyi merkeze almak zorundayız. Çünkü inovasyonun gerçek gücü insanlarda, kurumlarda ve ortak çalışma kültüründe ortaya çıkmaktadır. Bilginin paylaşılması, yerel kapasitenin geliştirilmesi ve yenilikçi düşüncenin teşvik edilmesi bu sürecin temelini oluşturmaktadır. Sürdürülebilir kalkınma amaçlarına ulaşmak da büyükelçide bu yerel ortaklıkların gücüne bağlıdır. Daha kapsayıcı, daha dirençli ve daha sürdürülebilir toplumlar inşa etmek için yerel yönetimlerin yenilik üretme kapasitesini arttırmak ve onları küresel işbirliği ağlarının merkezine yerleştirmek zorundayız. Bugünkü diyalog bizi eylemleri hızlandırmak ve hem günümüz hem de gelecekteki nesiller için somut sonuçlar elde etmek amacıyla bu koalisyonları ve ortaklıkları nasıl güçlendirebileceğimiz üzerine düşünmeye davet ediyor. Bu soruları irdelememize yardımcı olmak üzere kıymetli konuşmacılarımızı ve ortaklarımızı aramızda görmekten büyük bir mutluluk duyuyorum. Şimdi açılış konuşmalarını yapmak üzere Bayan Yu Ning Hwang, Singapur Yaşanabilir Şehirler Merkezi İcra Direktörü'ne sözü takdim ediyorum.
Thank you so much. Thanks for giving me the floor, and thank you to UCLG for the invitation to speak at this important session. Singapore's Center for Livable Cities serves as a global knowledge center for urban transformation by leveraging practitioner-led experiences drawn from Singapore's own development journey and other cities from around the world. The themes that are raised in today's session resonates very much with that of the recently concluded World City Summit in Singapore, with the theme of Act Now, accelerating, collaborating, and transforming ideas from diverse partners into innovative and practical solutions being the key. So convenings such as the UCLG World Congress and the World City Summit are important in bringing together city leaders to openly share what has worked well for our cities and what has not worked well. It helps to shorten our collective learning curves while forging stronger bonds of trust. This is increasingly important in a fractured world. Using the recent World City Summit Mayors Forum as an example, where we had discussions involving more than 100 mayors, key priority areas are very similar on affordable housing. Mayors called for bolder leadership, innovative financing, partnerships, and more inclusive approaches to accelerating delivery of affordable housing, recognizing that access to a home is foundational to any livable city. Urban resilience is the second theme, where mayors highlighted the need to deepen collaboration, as what we are discussing now, across public, private, and people sectors to tackle water resilience and energy transition, because no single actor can solve these problems. And thirdly, citizen-centric services. Mayors acknowledged that transforming municipal services to be efficient and reliable and responsible to residents is not only an operational imperative, but a matter of public trust. Beyond such events, it is important for the conversations and partnerships to extend for the longer term and to be inclusive across all levels, at different levels, to sustain that conversation, so across the political leadership, the public officials, and the institutional levels. Some of the examples that we have put forth include the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize City Network and fellowships that creates this inclusive and sustained collaboration and exchange at different levels. So the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize Network is a platform for urban leaders and practitioners to connect, collaborate, and create knowledge on building livable and sustainable cities. The network currently comprises 26 member cities that have previously won the prize and been special mention cities. So this brings together leadership from the mayor's level, the city hall, planning departments, and knowledge organizations to share best-in-class practices, collaborate on common urban challenges, and support each other's knowledge efforts. There's also a new mayoral fellowship that provides guidance to current leaders from former leaders and to bring that discussion across different levels. We also include research fellowship to complement these exchanges to bring together city practitioners and researchers, and urban leaders fellowship for the senior professionals from City Hall and planning offices. Ultimately, it's not just involving government leadership, but also business and innovators from the private sector to bring capital, innovation, and agility to scale in ways that city government and public agencies may not be able to. And for partnership with the universities and other innovation R&D centers so that we can bring together new technology, new thinking to the way we resolve government and city level issues. None of us have all the answers. Every city, regardless of the size or stage of its development, has experiences that others can learn from. We hope we will continue to come together, exchange knowledge, and learn from each other. Thank you so much.
Singapur temsilcisine değerli katkılarından dolayı teşekkür ediyorum. Şimdi sözü Sello Inohta'da Morero, Johannesburg Belediye Başkanı ve Küresel Şehir Geliştirme Konu Başkanımıza takdim ediyorum.
Thank you, the chairperson of the session, president of UCLG, and of course acknowledgement to the Secretary General, Amelia, and the entire leadership. Colleagues, partners, and friends, let me also greet you today. I speak today as the Mayor of Johannesburg and the chairperson of the FMDV, from a city and a continent that know what transformation demands. The 20th century built institutions to finance nations. The 21st century must learn how to finance institutions. And transitions take form in territories It takes form in transport systems, in housing, in energy, in water, in food markets, local entrepreneurs, and public spaces. This is the mutation before us. Finance designed for another century cannot carry the responsibilities of this one. The old rules still decide who is considered creditworthy, who is risk is protected, and whose currency matters, whose projects are visible, whose data counts, and whose priorities become investment. We need to give this mutation a name. Let me also acknowledge the president of SALGA, who just came in. We call it the territorial age of finance. It means that territories become a starting point for financial design. It means that mayors and governors enter the financial conversation with mandates, assets, data, land, procurement power, and local knowledge, communities, portfolios, and political responsibility. It means a new microfinance from territories, which refers to fiscal space that reflects real responsibilities, revenue systems that strengthens local public action, guarantees that unlock investment without pushing all risks onto communities, and local currency solutions that reduce vulnerability, climate finance, that reaches where adaptation happens, and digital tools that make flows traceable and accountable. It also means returning finance to the real economy of territories, hosting, care, energy, mobility, water, waste, circular economy, cooperatives, and small enterprises, and the services that makes dignity possible. The instruments of the market can serve speculation, or they can serve the public good. No instrument is neutral. A guarantee, a tax incentive, a land decision, a procurement rule, and an insurance mechanism, or digital platform, each can concentrate wealth, or each can distribute opportunity. This is the new responsibility of local and regional governments. We manage land, we organize demand, we plan growth, we procure services, we see risks before they become disasters. We see opportunities before they become markets. These are financial powers. In this new age, mayors and governors must become public interest market makers and engineers of public wealth and shared prosperity. This is the direction of FMDV has been testing with the UCLG, the European Union, national governments, public financial institutions, and local and regional governments. Through Finance Your Cities, our joint initiative to localize finance through country-level action, we have developed dedicated country platforms, national spaces where ministries, local governments, public development banks, communities and partners can align frameworks, prioritize, and financing pathways. In Cameroon and Madagascar, these platforms are already showing how to move from scattered projects to structured territorial portfolios. Through FinHubs, we are building the engineering capacity that territories need to prepare, aggregate, safeguard, and negotiate investment. Through Global Alliance and subnational development banks, we are strengthening the last mile public banks and understand local governments can connect domestic and international capital to territorial realities. In Johannesburg, the African Development Bank has demonstrated what is possible when multilateral finance reaches cities directly, approving a landmark loan to the city of Johannesburg, the first of its kind on the African continent, to renew aging infrastructure for over 6 million residents. Following the Santa Marta Conference on the transition away from fossil fuels, where FMDV and partners worked to play social solidarity. Let me conclude the speech in referring to matters, especially for the Global South. Many of the deepest development challenges are concentrated in our regions, shaped by global inequalities and financial rules that still do not reflect our realities. The solutions will be forged where the pressure to transform is the greatest. In African cities, in Latin American regions, Asian territories, and island communities that are already inventing new forms of public action. Perhaps program director and the chairperson let a clear message lift Tangier, which will mean finance will earn the trust of this century when it reaches the places where transformation is lived. We will turn risk into resilience. We will turn investment into dignity. We will turn innovation into shared prosperity. And we will demonstrate that territories are where the future is designed. Thank you.
Bu önemli değerlendirmeden dolayı kendisine teşekkür ediyorum. Şimdi ortaklarımızla diyalog sürecini yürütmek üzere moderatörümüz Billy Cabot, UCLG Ubuntu danışmanına sözü takdim ediyorum.
Thank you, Chair. To address this topic of coalitions for local innovation, which really goes to the heart of UCLG's membership mandate and indeed opportunity, we have 6 partners to address this topic, followed by 3 respondents. And I will ask, of course, each of the partners to be sharp, focused, and clear in their presentations. We begin with Mr. Adnan Seric from the United Nations, from UNIDO's. He's head of the Innovation Lab at UNIDO. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished mayors, governors, Secretary General of Science, dear colleagues, it is my great honor to address you today on behalf of UNIDO at the UCLG General Assembly, the space where the global municipal movement comes together to shape its collective priorities and voice. We are meeting at a defining moment. Across the world, cities are on the front lines of climate transition, economic restructuring, and growing inequalities, just to name a few of our common grand challenges. But cities are not only facing these challenges, they're increasingly leading the solutions. At UNIDO, we see this very clearly. The future of industrial development is urban, and the success of our common agenda, the SDGs, will depend on what happens in cities and territories. UNIDO's mandate of fostering inclusive and sustainable industrial development is directly aligned with your responsibilities as local and regional leaders to build resilient local economies, create jobs and economic opportunities, and advance green and circular transitions. Today, this requires 2 things. First, connecting industrial policies with local realities, and translating innovation into investment and scale. This is why UNIDO is increasingly working directly with cities to strengthen local industries, create jobs, and support innovations that delivers real solutions for communities. In this context, our partnership with UCLG is essential. It was significantly strengthened last year in Xi'an, China, where we jointly convened UNIDO's Bridge for Cities, our flagship convening platform, and UCLG's World Council. Since then, the collaboration has evolved into a more strategic partnership, combining UNIDO's technical expertise with UCLG's global political leadership of cities and local governments. We are now working towards a formal memorandum of understanding to scale this cooperation further. A key priority we share is clear: to move from dialogue to implementation and from innovation to scale. Through UNIDO's Bridge for Cities initiative, we have created a global political and convening space. We are bringing together cities, industries, and investors, aligning priorities and building public-private partnerships. The Global ScaleX Alliance for Cities has a clear purpose. We are building on the experience, of the partnership under the Bridge for Cities. The Global ScaleX Alliance for Cities that we are launching together with UCLG is our next step. The alliance has a clear purpose: to connect cities and regions with innovation ecosystems, industrial partners, and finance. To bring together demand for innovative solutions around key transitions such as green industry, circular economy, and local production. And ultimately, to support better deployment and scaling of proven solutions through structured cooperation. A central way we will do this is by championing the concept of innovation scaling corridors. And I've brought with me a few hard copies of a publication that we have jointly produced in the run-up to this Congress to introduce the concept also to you here. So feel free to approach me afterwards if you would like to take a copy with you. By innovation corridors, we mean groups of cities and territories that join forces around a small number of shared missions, linking their local industries, innovators, and institutions, and ensuring that solutions proven to work in one place can quickly travel to others. This is not just an idea. The first innovation scaling corridor is already taking shape in the Western Balkans. Cities like Tirana, Podgorica, Skopje, and Sarajevo are joining forces around the common ambition to build greener, more competitive local industries and to create better jobs for their citizens. Together, they are identifying shared challenges, articulating joint missions, selecting promising solutions, and testing them in real industrial zones and neighborhoods. This Western Balkans Innovation Corridor is an early example of what the Global ScaleX Alliance for Cities can mean in practice and how we move from local innovation to systemic transformation. Let me use this occasion to invite you, cities and local government leaders, to come forward and become founding members of the Global ScaleX Alliance for Cities. We want you to share the missions and challenges you want to tackle first. We want you to help shape the next generation of scaling corridors that connect your territories. And we want you to join the first wave of cities where we will test and scale concrete and innovative solutions. We also warmly invite you to join us at the next Bridge for Cities in Vienna from 28th to 30th of October 2026 as a platform to connect your local ambitions with global opportunities and investment, and as a key moment to advance the work of the Global ScaleX Alliance for Cities. Let me conclude by saying that the future of inclusive and sustainable industrial development will be shaped in your cities and territories. With our joint initiatives, UNIDO and UCLG want to stand by your side. Together, we can turn local innovation into lasting transformation that citizens can see and feel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adnan. It's wonderful to hear of this collaboration with UNIDO. It's really, really superb. It gives me great pleasure to invite Aziza Akmouche, who is Head of Cities, Urban Policies and Sustainable Development at the OECD in Paris. Aziza.
Thank you, Billy, and it's good to see you. It's been a while. And I'd like, before I respond to the question that was asked to me, which is basically a sort of overview of the main messages from the OECD on the conditions that can enable local innovation to emerge and to scale up and to deliver long-term impact. I'd like to thank Emilia and congratulate the entire team for hosting us. It's always, I have to say, a great source of energy for us. We're running a different form of multilateralism at the OECD these days, and I think sometimes when you're wondering about your utility function, just go and talk to mayors. I think it's the enthusiasm and the energy that has come out of the different interventions is really reinvigorating, so thanks a lot for that. Now, going back to your question, what we see actually in the work we've been doing is that often ideas lack conditions that can make them stick, at least in the cities that we've worked. In practice, too many innovations are remaining at the pilot stage or as awards or good stories, but they don't necessarily transform daily lives, or they're not doing that fast enough. And for that to happen, actually, the work we've been doing recently shows that there are three main conditions to work on. The first one is really to acknowledge that innovation requires the right systems and internal capacity in place, and many of the preceding speakers did say that. We've been working with Bloomberg Philanthropies for over a decade now. I'm happy to see Claudia Juez here. And we've been really trying to assess the extent to which innovation in the local public sector, in city government administration, is making a difference, and see that across the board, it's delivering better well-being outcomes. Whether we're talking about services, safety, health, and satisfaction, these are investments that are often not very tangible compared to traditional hard infrastructure, but that do make a difference in terms of local government capacity. And the survey, actually, we've recently completed over 70 cities, showed that most of them are trying to adopt ideas from their peers, but they are facing a number of implementation challenges. So tomorrow at 10 a.m. with Claudia, actually, we'll be launching a toolkit on idea adoption that is precisely aiming at showing how you can unlock that potential to take a shortcut and see what is working elsewhere and just replicate it at home, taking into account your local specificities and needs. The second condition is that innovation must be place-based, and the idea there is that it has to be actually anchored in a city's real function within a territorial system. And the work that we did with the European Commission that I launched this morning at the Forum of Intermediary Cities, a new major report on unlocking the potential of intermediary cities, shows clearly that every city can actually innovate. It's not just the big ones, but not every city should innovate in the same way. And this is really the main message, that even when their economic base or social needs are different, cities have the same potential for innovation. And that report is showing, in particular, the need to pay closer political attention to intermediary cities that have been a sort of missing middle in terms of growth potential and innovation engines in national strategies, and often invisible to date, even if the post-pandemic has kind of put a sort of a spotlight on the potential of these intermediary cities to improve quality of life and well-being of residents. So innovation that is ignoring somehow this local reality is becoming a sort of expensive imitation, and for that to work, it has to build on this strength, on visible local needs, and also to connect to regional ecosystems. And then the last part that has come out strongly from our work, this time jointly with UCLG, is related to the fiscal space, and echoing a lot of what the mayor of Joburg has said, that local governments need to have the fiscal space to actually be able to experiment and to invest in innovation. And this is where our joint observatory with UCLG, or World Observatory on Subnational Governance and Finance and Investment, has tracked data across 135 countries and has shown basically that subnational governments are responsible for 55% of public investment, but also that they're facing growing fiscal pressure. We see the median deficit of subnational governments tracked by the OECD reaching 3% in 2024, which is the weakest since the global financial crisis. We see that total investment is declining, that 40% of subnational government revenue coming from central government transfers is at stake when budgets are tightening. And so it's really important to show the predictable and sufficient revenues to strengthen the fiscal autonomy, to provide greater access to diversified financing tools, and to support adequate investment capacities, because who has somehow the power to invest determines who can innovate. And I'll finish inviting you to the session tomorrow at 2:30, room B, where my colleague Ati will be presenting the latest findings from the World Observatory with UCLG and some of the main data that we have produced in that framework. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Aziza, and it's always good to hear that OECD keeps getting energized by the mayors, and long may it continue. We now go to the government of Catalonia. Mr. Augusti Fernandez de Losada is Secretary for European Affairs, Multilateral Affairs and Development Cooperation.
Muchas gracias, Billy. Y bueno, dejarme empezar también, mostrando mi satisfacción por intervenir en esta Asamblea General. Es un placer compartir reflexiones con todos los gobiernos locales y regionales que forman parte de esta inmensa familia, de este inmenso movimiento. Felicitar también a Emilia, a la secretaria general, a la presidencia por la organización y a Tangier por la organización de este fantástico congreso. Yo voy a seguir un poco con el hilo que ha abierto Aziza, hablando o reflexionando en torno a un tema que me parece esencial, la localización de la financiación de los gobiernos subnacionales, cómo acceden a la financiación y de la relevancia de un instrumento que nos parece extremadamente importante, este Observatorio Global de la Financiación y la Inversión Subnacional, que es una iniciativa conjunta de CGLU con la OCDE o de la OCDE con CGLU, que recibe el apoyo de algunos otros actores como el Gobierno de la Generalitat de Cataluña, que desde hace unos meses está apoyando la iniciativa. Insisto, porque nos parece una iniciativa esencial. Parto para mi reflexión de un consenso que yo creo que nos reúne a todos. Los gobiernos locales y regionales juegan un papel fundamental en el despliegue de políticas públicas extremadamente sensibles o en sectores extremadamente sensibles. Lo hemos reflexionado en torno a los ODS y a cómo avanzamos en la consecución de los ODS y el vínculo de los ODS con los territorios. Lo decía ahora Aziza, los gobiernos locales y regionales, independientemente de su tamaño, no solo las grandes ciudades o las grandes regiones, también ciudades intermedias, incluso ciudades pequeñas, tienen un potencial enorme para innovar en las soluciones. Y lo hemos visto en momentos clave en el tiempo muy reciente. Lo vimos, por ejemplo, durante el COVID, ¿no? Como desde lo local, desde lo territorial, se innovó para abordar soluciones a una crisis global de dimensiones muy importantes. Pero sin recursos es imposible abordar o impulsar políticas públicas eficientes, es imposible o es muy difícil innovar. El acceso a la financiación es clave. Los gobiernos locales y regionales en todas las partes del mundo requieren acceder a financiación. Y, por tanto, por eso nos parece relevante hablar de la localización de la financiación. Aziza ponía algunas cifras. En los países de la OCDE, los gobiernos locales y regionales participan de más del 40% del gasto público. En mi país, en España, eso llega prácticamente al 50%, pero es que hay muchos países donde ese porcentaje no pasa del 2, del 1,5%, del 2%. Por tanto, la situación ahí es diferente. Cuando hablamos de la necesidad de localizar la agenda de la financiación, estamos hablando de descentralización fiscal, estamos hablando de participación en los ingresos del Estado, estamos hablando de transferencias no condicionadas, estamos hablando de un tema muy relevante como es el acceso a los bancos de desarrollo o al mercado de la deuda por parte de los gobiernos subnacionales. No en todas partes pueden acceder a esa deuda. Estamos hablando de financiación innovadora, de financiación climática, de financiación de impacto. Estamos hablando de ser capaces de impulsar mecanismos de colaboración desde lo territorial, de colaboración público-privada o trabajar con las filantropías. Y estamos hablando finalmente de cooperación al desarrollo. Todo esto lo vimos recientemente en Sevilla en el marco de la cumbre sobre financiación del desarrollo que se organizó en Sevilla, y todo eso quedó recogido en varias de las plataformas de acción que se impulsaron desde Sevilla. Por tanto, y cierro, me parece muy relevante contar con datos que ayuden a mejorar las políticas públicas que se impulsan desde lo territorial, que ayuden a innovar, que nos ayuden a profundizar o abordar las desigualdades territoriales. Ese es un tema clave, a incidir, datos que nos ayuden a incidir en las agendas domésticas y en las agendas globales, y si no hay capacidad de desagregar datos, todo esto es muy difícil. Y por eso, insisto y cierro, me parece muy relevante el trabajo que se está realizando en esa coalición entre CGLU, la OCDE, con el apoyo de otros actores, incluso de la cooperación descentralizada, como la Generalitat de Cataluña, en el marco del Observatorio Global de las Finanzas Subnacionales. Gracias.
Thank you very much, and thank you for keeping to time. I now invite Mr. Frederic Blanc, representative of the Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, France.
Merci beaucoup, mesdames et messieurs les coprésidents, madame la secrétaire générale, mesdames et messieurs les maires et représentants des gouvernements locaux. Je suis Frédéric Blanc, je travaille au ministère de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères à la délégation pour les collectivités territoriales et la société civile, et je souhaiterais remercier l'Assemblée générale de CGLU pour me permettre de parler avec vous aujourd'hui, et notamment ce que je souhaiterais évoquer avec vous, c'est la question des partenariats internationaux et notre soutien aux outils tels que le WOFI porté par CGLU. Pour la France, et plus particulièrement pour le ministère de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères français, le soutien aux outils tels que le WOFI s'inscrit dans une conviction forte, celle qu'il existe une diplomatie démultipliée, et dans celle-ci, que la diplomatie des collectivités, la diplomatie dite territoriale, occupe une place spécifique. Les collectivités territoriales françaises, pour le ministère de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères, constituent le premier partenaire, notamment en matière financière. Elles contribuent aux priorités en matière de développement durable, de localisation des objectifs de développement durable et un effet levier des investissements, notamment pour le financement des services publics essentiels dans le monde. Et notamment, la diplomatie territoriale constitue aussi pour la France un outil d'influence majeur. Pour agir efficacement, il est nécessaire de comprendre les réalités territoriales. Et une bonne politique publique ne peut se faire que sur le fondement d'une science libre. Je le répète, sur le fondement d'une science libre, de données fiables et surtout constatables par tous, et en premier lieu de nos concitoyens. C'est pour cela que lorsqu'on parle d'innovation locale, le WOFI, porté par CGLU et par l'OCDE, est essentiel et stratégique. Il documente de manière rigoureuse et comparable à l'échelle internationale le rôle réel des gouvernements locaux et régionaux, leur contribution à l'investissement public, aux services essentiels et au développement durable. Il rend visible ce rôle, le poids économique, politique et financier des collectivités territoriales dans nos politiques publiques. Et c'est à partir de cette visibilité que nous pouvons, ensemble avec les élus locaux, construire et intégrer les collectivités territoriales dans les dialogues nationaux et internationaux, mais aussi renforcer leur accès au financement et leur capacité à peser dans les choix qui les concernent. Ce moment et cette discussion que l'on a aujourd'hui est crucial dans les discussions actuelles issues des dialogues de Séville sur la réforme du financement du développement durable et l'architecture financière internationale. En France, nous construisons aujourd'hui notre aide publique au développement dans une logique de partenariat réciproque et équilibré, car le monde d'aujourd'hui ne ressemble pas au monde des années 50 ou des années 80. Nous considérons en France qu'il n'y a pas plus de Nord global que de Sud global, car il y a aujourd'hui plutôt une coalition. Nous parlons aujourd'hui à des coalitions de nations volontaires qui décident ensemble de travailler, de former des coalitions sur les enjeux majeurs de notre siècle. Et dans ces nations volontaires, vous trouverez toujours à vos côtés l'Europe, l'Union européenne, qui constitue aujourd'hui un des continents où la décision est la plus sûre, la plus prévisible et la plus fiable. Et c'est tout le sens du nouveau dialogue politique qu'a souhaité engager notre président de la République, M. Emmanuel Macron, que ce dialogue politique, il a voulu construire notamment avec l'Afrique depuis 2017, et dont le dernier sommet Afrique-France a révélé la force qui est celle de travailler avec les sociétés civiles, les entreprises et les collectivités. Les évolutions récentes du dialogue entre l'ONU et les autorités locales vont dans ce sens souhaitable d'une meilleure reconnaissance du rôle des collectivités territoriales dans la gouvernance mondiale. C'est tout le sens de la déclaration de l'Urban 7, groupe d'engagement du G7, à Nancy le mois dernier, et dont les conclusions restent encore à consolider avec l'ensemble des autorités locales dans le monde. La France a fait le choix de la décentralisation, de la confiance, pas par esprit d'irresponsabilité ou par esprit de vouloir déléguer les choses, les politiques publiques aux autorités locales, mais parce qu'on considère en France qu'on gouverne bien de loin, mais on n'administre que bien de près. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Frederick. We now move to the other side of the room, and I have pleasure in inviting Mr. Sebastian Vozel, head of the Local 2030 Coalition.
Thank you. Good afternoon, مساء الخير. شكرا على طنجة إلى الاستقبال. كنت 3 سنين هنايا في طنجة وقلبي ما زال يسكن هنايا. So thank you very much. Thank you to UCLG also for the invitation, and congratulations to Emilia for the leadership and for the great organization of this event. Systemic crises that we heard a lot about today are calling for systemic response. And a big part of these systems are unfolding and can be addressed at a local level. At the same time, lasting peace cannot happen without sustainable development everywhere, not only in all countries, but also in all territories, cities, and communities. And this is why local leaders have a very important role to play into building peace, into building lasting, sustainable development. They have a key role not only as a local leader, but catalyzing also across the board civil society organizations, private sector entities, the population and communities, and articulating with national governments and regional bodies and global coalitions in making all share a same vision of territorial transformation and systems change, and materialize these visions through clear roles and responsibilities for everyone, therefore improving the delivery of public services, economic opportunities of decent work for all, climate action that unfolds in a great share at local level, and ultimately the renewal of the social contract that we badly need to have to build lasting peace. And the United Nations acknowledge this, and this is why it installed in Bilbao, Spain, Basque Country, the Local 2030 Coalition, which secretariat I am heading, that brings together 15 UN entities from all the wide range of mandates to ensure the convergence towards the territorialization, the localization of global agendas, and also have 6 constituencies: national governments, local and regional governments, civil society organizations, academia, private sector, and youth, to bring together all these stakeholders to make systemic change happen. And we do this not just in the implementation phase, but from the design, because local and regional governments and local stakeholders are not mere implementers, they are co-leaders of the road, the pathways towards a better world that we are all building together. It's also not through a top-down approach of localizing global agendas, but really a bottom-up approach of scaling up local action to produce systemic change everywhere. And in this action-oriented space that the Local 2030 Coalition has become, where most of you that I see here are active part of, we have 3 work streams, and this is how we produce innovation. That is the thematic that brings us together in this panel. One is bringing local voices to the global stage so that local stakeholders participate in the design of the agendas, the financing agendas that Agusti was mentioning, the COP and the climate agendas, the social also summit, etc. I could go on, but also beyond 2030, starting to ramp up the engagement beyond 2030, and we also partner on this with OECD, with the global stocktake that we are working on together. So shaping global agendas with local voices but also scaling up action, and to do so catalyze and canalize finance towards local players where it's most needed to scale up local action. And this we do directly, providing support to territorial transformation directly with technical support and funding. $74 million have been channeled in partnership with the Joint SDG Fund so far towards transformative initiatives in 30 different countries so far, but also through tools such as the localization marker, the localization blueprint, and through processes such as the Bilbao Bootcamp that have proven spaces and tools that can foster transformation from a bottom-up approach and scale up action for systems change. So this is where I see that this is a great time for coalitions, because it's a complicated backdrop of systemic crises and of pushback from some players on multilateralism and other sustainable development related processes. This is where we must be stronger together, and this is where we must generate action at all levels that has systemic impact and therefore generate hopes to bring a movement toward lasting peace and sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. Also, I noticed you use both analog and digital time reminders, which is very interesting. Last partner today is Claudia Juch, who is from the Government Innovation Program at Bloomberg Philanthropies. Claudia.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Emilia, and thank you to the UCLG team and the UCLG presidency. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to take the theme of this session, coalitions for local innovation, a little bit more from a practitioner perspective, as you can imagine, because I'm speaking from the perspective of the Government Innovation Program at Bloomberg Philanthropies. We concretely work with mayors and cities on strengthening leadership and innovation capacity. And that is a focus that grew directly out of Mike Bloomberg's experience as the 3-time mayor of New York. He saw that ambition mattered, but that ambition was not enough, and that cities also needed people, systems, data, partnerships, and ways of working that allowed them to solve problems more effectively, adapt as circumstances change, and deliver better results for residents. So, we heard about the big picture, we heard about, the context, Aziza described it, and other speakers, but, what does a city need to really make coalitions work within the city boundaries, but also across different levels of government and with other multilateral partners? I think the benefits of coalitions are super clear. They allow cities to do things that they cannot do alone. They bring in expertise that doesn't sit in City Hall. They build legitimacy around difficult choices. They unlock resources. And at their very best, they help sustain change beyond a single project or a single political moment. But it's also worth acknowledging that coalitions are hard. Partnerships are typically built around shared interests, and coalitions are often built around shared challenges. So that means it brings together organizations such as city departments, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and others that may all care about the same issue, but they may not define the problem in the same way. They rarely move at the same speed, and they are not accountable to the same people. So what does that mean? I think it's not only important when we look at the coalitions that already exist, but what are the skills and practices does coalition building require inside city government? What really is that muscle that you need to move you forward? And it won't come as a surprise to you that coming from Bloomberg Philanthropies, we say it starts with you. It starts with leadership. That's why coalition building is an important part of the curricula that we provide at the Harvard Leadership Initiatives and others. And as James Anderson, who leads and has built the overall Government Innovation Program, would say, mayors play a critical role in naming the challenge, setting direction, and creating urgency. But leadership alone, as you also know, is not enough. Coalition building requires the city government itself to be organized for that work. It needs the ability to map the actors around a problem, understand what each one can contribute, align incentives, manage relationships, and keep the work moving when disagreements emerge. That's not super glamorous. It's also not always visible work, but it's most often the difference between a coalition that produces a statement of intent and a coalition that truly produces results. So to conclude, coalition building is not just something entrepreneurial individuals do because they happen to be good at relationships. It's an organizational capacity that city governments need to build systematically. And that's also why I'm glad I will do the same that Aziza did earlier and do a plug. Coalition building is included in a set of capabilities, of public sector capabilities that our partners at UCLIIPP will be speaking on Thursday about. And the practical question I want to leave you with is, when you are building coalitions in your cities, are you also building the capabilities inside your own city government that make those coalitions work? That's where I think the real opportunity lies, because ultimately, those capabilities are what allow cities to keep solving problems, even as those problems themselves change. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. That concludes the interventions from our 6 partners. And I now going to move over to the three respondents. I'm going to just make an adjustment to the order because of time pressures and invite Mr. Isan Nikolaev, Governor of the Sakha Republic in Russia, to make the first response.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will speak Russian. Добрый вечер, уважаемые друзья. Для меня большая честь выступить перед вами, представить вашему вниманию опыт развития инновационной экосистемы Республики Саха-Якутия, самого крупного региона России. Площадь Якутии составляет свыше 3 миллионов квадратных километров. Это практически такая страна, как Индия. Вся ее территория расположена в зоне вечной мерзлоты, в одном из самых экстремальных по климату частей Земли. Часто у меня спрашивают, как вообще человек может жить минус 50 градусов. Но мы знаем, что родина у человека там, где теплее его душе, а наша суровая земля согрета теплом многих поколений и многих народов. Наша республика очень богата природными ресурсами, но главное богатство многонациональной Якутии – это люди, самобытная культура, преемственность вековых традиций, духовных ценностей. Всем этим мы гордимся и бережно храним. Особенности нашего огромного региона настолько уникальны, что любой вид деятельности человека, любая отрасль экономики требует особых разработок и технологий. Над этим работает наука, инновационные решения внедряются в промышленные, инфраструктурные проекты, становятся драйвером креативных индустрий. Диапазон изысканий и внедрений очень широк. Я рассматриваю цифровизацию как инструмент для устойчивого развития северных территорий, развития человеческого капитала и сохранения культурного наследия. Для этого мы целенаправленно развиваем цифровую инфраструктуру и коммуникации. В наших условиях это требует огромных ресурсов и уникальных технологий. С 2018 года в Якутии проложено 15 тысяч километров оптоволокна на вечной мерзлоте. В прошлом году стартовал крупнейший в истории России проект строительства телекоммуникационной инфраструктуры с энергией Арктики, и за 3 года мы построим более 7 тысяч километров волоконно-оптических линий связи. А это значит, что для огромных арктических территорий, для их жителей станет настоящим цифровым прорывом, который откроет жителям новые возможности для образования, здравоохранения, управления, повседневной жизни. Мы убеждены, что современное развитие невозможно без активного внедрения искусственного интеллекта. Его развитие – это не только технологический, но и цивилизационный шаг вперед. Мы первыми в России утвердили региональную стратегию развития искусственного интеллекта. Ее ключевые направления связаны с ускоренным внедрением технологий государственное и муниципальное управление, развитием креативных индустрий, подготовкой кадров и использованием в отраслях, которые обеспечивают безопасность жизнедеятельности. Наша цель – внедрение эффективных цифровых технологий во все сферы экономики, государственного управления и социальной сферы. Мы планируем до 2030 года открыть Центр обработки данных для проведения исследований и практических разработок в сфере искусственного интеллекта, создать единый интеллектуальный сервис для органов государственной и местной власти. Особое внимание мы уделим подготовке кадров, направленной на развитие компетенций в области работы с данными и технологий искусственного интеллекта. Уважаемые коллеги, развивая цифровые сервисы для улучшения качества наших людей, экономического роста, безопасной жизнедеятельности в наших регионах, мы воспринимаем цифровую трансформацию как фактор расширения сотрудничества. Особенно это очевидно сегодня, когда мир переживает период турбулентности, сталкиваясь с серьезными вызовами, в том числе и угрозами кибербезопасности. Поэтому сотрудничество, обмен эффективным опытом, компетенциями и решениями – это важное условие для взаимодействия во многих сферах – торговле, инвестициях, науке, технологиях, туризме и народной дипломатии. Общечеловеческой ценностью цифровизации обладает для сохранения и продвижения языкового и культурного многообразия. Якутия вносит свой вклад в развитие такого сотрудничества. С 2019 года мы проводим Международный Северный форум по устойчивому развитию. Его ключевая задача – объединить усилия науки, власти, бизнеса и общества для выработки практических решений в области устойчивого развития северных регионов при сохранении природы, культуры и баланса интересов. Я приглашаю всех заинтересованных коллег присоединиться к работе форума и внести свой вклад в объединение усилий для развития наших территорий. Уверен, что наш плодотворный разговор в рамках форума ОГМВ откроет новые возможности для сотрудничества по вопросам, которые сегодня особенно актуальны для преодоления цифрового неравенства, для укрепления современных коммуникаций, которые стирают границы между государствами и регионами. Желаю всем нам продвижения и успехов в интересах наших жителей. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much, Governor. Emilia, I'm advised that the microphone is, the controller is coming back to you. Is that correct?
Well, thank you very much. I think you did your job to facilitate the list of speakers that we had in advance, and we now have a couple of others. I will ask all of them to be very brief. We miss Javier Cortés, one of our partners as well, the director of the Lankidetza, the Basque Agency for Cooperation and Solidarity. Javier, sorry that we overlooked your name. Please do take the floor.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Thank you very much, chairs. It's an honor to participate in this session. I would like to add to try to add to all what has been said, so relevant. The concept of what's going to be the receipt against the times and the challenges that we're living, historic challenges, which is trust. I think trust is the key element that is going to help us to transition, from into a model of human sustainable development that and the world we want. Without that, it's going to be impossible. There's no traction. There's no financial traction. There's no democratic traction. There's no capacity. There's no economic, social, or governance traction. And in order to achieve trust, we need to be rooted the decisions in realities. And that's where the local context, the local realities kick in. Decisions that are taken too far from reality, where the rubber hits the ground, are too disconnected, are too oriented by different drivers of decision. When it comes to build trust, you need to understand that reality is complex. Reality comes as a whole. Cultural dimension is connected to the economic dimension, to the social dimension, to the institutional dimension, to the environmental and human dimensions. All that come together in local context. So here's where we need to start building trust. So the bottom-up approaches are critical. And in order to do this, we need to be innovative, and coalitions, alliances, partnerships are going to be essential. No single actor alone can provide substantive and significant solutions to build trust in providing responses to people's needs, or also into the needs of the financial sector, which is aiming at credibility and stability in the long term. So that's where we will trust, by partnering together, aiming together at shared goals, and building pathways for long-term stability and solutions. In order to do this, we need to understand the territory. We need to mobilize all the levers to start shaping together these challenges. We need to root into the cultural dimension, that has been said. We need to mobilize this feeling of belonging. We have been disconnected to the capacity to act collaboratively. And it's by mobilizing what makes us human, what makes us, connected to reality. And in order to do that, art, culture, memory, feeling of belonging, all these elements are going to be substantive. And UCLG is working on the cultural dimension in a very systemic way, so this is critical to lever and to push. This alone won't make a difference, but without it, it's going to be impossible. Then we need to innovate also in the ways that we build governance, and then we come again to the local and the territorial dimension. We need to innovate in putting the capacities where we can make the decision-making change people's lives. So rooting that capacities in terms of fiscality, in terms of decentralization, in terms of competencies, in terms of regulation, to build also multi-stakeholder governance settings so that we can collaborate together. We need to innovate also and empower the local productive sector, connected with the territory, not connected with speculative orientations. We need to connect the productive sector to the territory. And we need to shape together the incentives for the long term together with the private sector, with the institutional settings, with civil society that can bring the human rights-based approaches and the academic resources. That's where we can start shaping together partnerships, roadmaps in the long term, rebuild and reconnect with people's capacity to feel that these are providing responses, and also provide trust to the financial sector in providing long-term plans, resilient, robust, credible, where we can start mobilizing also this finance for development, which is the critical item. Financial sector needs long-term, and the long-term we created by partnering, by shaping together. That's how we're gonna robust the capacity to transition into long-term economies, societies, and at the end, livelihoods for people. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for bringing this issue of trust and linking it to this long-term vision on financing that both Agustí and Aziza were referring to. It's part of the work that we're trying to do in the observatory, tracking what is really happening to look at the longer term. So thank you very much for those inputs. I think this is a very important topic for our Forum of Regions agenda. That kind of longer-term vision of financing and collaboration. So we'll take note of that, and I'm sure our colleagues from FMDB, I see the mayor of Johannesburg is still with us, will team up with us in this agenda. Thank you very much. Look, we are already late because we have a very important item that comes next, which is deciding the list of the World Council members. So nobody moves here from the elected officials because we need to adopt that. But before that, I want to give the floor to our co-president, Ana Lucía Reis, alcaldesa de Cobija. Es realmente un placer, alcaldesa, tenerla con nosotras, copresidenta. Y después, and after that, I'm going to give the floor to two other members from Asia Pacific. Those would be the last floors that we would be giving this afternoon before we go on to the next item. Alcaldesa, copresidenta, usted la palabra.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos. Dar gracias a Dios que estamos acá, todos bien, en esta actividad tan importante. Quiero agradecer mucho a Emilia y felicitarla porque realmente es impresionante cómo puede organizar estas actividades tan importantes juntando a los gobiernos locales del mundo. Así que felicidades, Emilia, y gracias a todos los que hacen parte de este equipo para organizar esta actividad. También agradecer muchísimo al alcalde de Tánger por el recibimiento tan bello, acogernos en su pueblo. Igualmente aquí a nuestro alcalde Ugur, Ibrahim, a todos los miembros del CGLU. Para mí, que vengo desde la... Con razón estoy sintiendo que repite todo en mi oído, estaba con el audífono. Para mí, que vengo desde la Amazonía boliviana, ¿no? Realmente muy importante todas las actividades que hemos tenido y todo lo que hemos logrado a través de estas actividades, escuchando ahorita a muchos cooperantes, a muchos municipios. Por ejemplo, Cataluña, nosotros recibimos el apoyo de nuestra Amazonía boliviana. Estamos trabajando con un programa Mónica, que es para la medición de la calidad del aire, ¿no? Estamos trabajando también con toda nuestra planta de agua a través de cooperantes, diferentes cooperantes, nuestra planta de agua potable que funciona con energía solar, nuestros colegios que funcionan con energía solar, nuestros baños ecológicos en áreas donde no hay alcantarillado. Y decirles que a través de estas reuniones que tenemos vamos logrando justamente estas conexiones y logrando estos pequeños proyectos muy impactantes para nuestra realidad amazónica, ¿no? Entonces, desde la Amazonía boliviana sabemos que la innovación local no comienza necesariamente con la tecnología, pero sino con la capacidad de construir alianzas para responder a las necesidades de nuestra gente. Los gobiernos locales enfrentamos desafíos complejos relacionados con el cambio climático, ¿no? La inclusión social, la conectividad y el acceso a servicios básicos. Ninguno de estos retos se puede resolver de una manera aislada. Y por ello las coaliciones entre gobiernos locales, organismos internacionales, universidades, sector privado y comunidades son fundamental para generar soluciones sostenibles adaptadas a cada territorio. Por eso también es muy importante que nuestros gobiernos locales puedan tener un trabajo y una conexión mucho más directa en cuestión de financiamiento con la cooperación internacional, porque en nuestros países, muchos de ellos, todavía la cooperación, cualquier inversión que hace tiene que ir a través de un gobierno central, y los gobiernos centrales políticamente ya se manejan hacia qué municipios van a poder entrar. Realmente esto es un anhelo que tenemos los gobiernos locales en nuestro país, ¿no? De poder trabajar directamente. Bueno, nuestra experiencia demuestra que cuando compartimos conocimiento, intercambiamos buenas prácticas y fortalecemos la cooperación entre ciudades, logramos acelerar procesos de innovación que mejoran la calidad de vida de la población. Algo importante para mejorar la calidad de vida de la población que venimos trabajando muy fuerte es que la única manera de conservar nuestros bosques es cuando le damos valor agregado a todos nuestros frutos, y que todos estos frutos con valor agregado también hacen parte de todos los programas del Estado, subsidio, merienda escolar, etcétera, ¿no? Garantizando justamente un mercado sostenible. Entonces, reafirmamos desde la Amazonía boliviana, reafirmamos nuestro compromiso de seguir construyendo alianzas que impulsen un desarrollo local inclusivo, resiliente, sostenible, asegurando que ningún territorio quede atrás. Nuevamente, Emilia, muchísimas gracias, y a todos, cada uno de ustedes que están acá. Y bueno, que Dios nos bendiga y éxito en el trabajo de cada uno de nosotros, y que acaben tantos conflictos que vivimos en los diferentes países del mundo. Alguien decía, nuestros países están retrocediendo en Latinoamérica, pero cuando vemos tantos problemas de guerra, yo creo que el retroceso se está dando a nivel mundial. Lo que hoy en día debería ser parte nomás de una historia, seguimos viviendo, y esperemos que eso cambie y que a través de estas grandes actividades del CGLU realmente vamos logrando cada vez más. Un grande abrazo, muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, copresidenta, por siempre traer tu humanidad a estas sesiones. Verdaderamente sí parece increíble que estemos en esta situación en el mundo cuando podemos estar de esta manera en esta sala. ¿No es cierto? Qué contraste. Allow me now to go, and I am begging for brief interventions from our members, from the President of the League of Municipalities of the Philippines. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the body. My name is Faustino D., Mayor of Echage, Isabela, also representing the League of Municipalities of the Philippines. So distinguished colleagues, fellow leaders, and partners, food security is no longer simply an agricultural issue. It is a governance issue, a resilience issue, and a development imperative. Across the Asia-Pacific region, local governments are increasingly demonstrating that innovative coalitions can transform food systems and strengthen community resilience. This intervention highlights the importance of local leadership in mobilizing partnerships among farmers, cooperatives, local businesses, national agencies, and communities. Through collaborative approaches, local governments can support agricultural productivity, improve market access, strengthen value chains, and ensure that food reaches the vulnerable populations, especially during times of crisis and economic uncertainty. Similarly, the leadership of the League of Municipalities of the Philippines demonstrates how intermunicipal cooperation can enhance food security by sharing knowledge, promoting sustainable farming practices, investing in climate-resilient agriculture, and building stronger local food systems. These coalitions enable municipalities to move beyond isolated initiatives and create scalable solutions that benefit entire regions. These experiences strongly resonate with the UCLG Strategic Plan and UCLG ASPAC 2026 to 2030 Manifesto, particularly its commitment to food systems and zero hunger, climate justice, finance, and new essentials. The manifesto recognizes that local and regional governments are at the front line of ensuring food security by fostering innovation, strengthening territorial cooperation, and promoting inclusive economic development. Coalitions for local innovation are therefore not optional. They are essential. By connecting governments, communities, academia, the private sector, and development partners, we can accelerate progress toward SDG 2, or zero hunger, while also advancing climate resilience, poverty reduction, and sustainable local economies. As we move forward, let us continue to invest in collaborative governance, empower our farmers and local producers, and build food systems that are resilient, inclusive, and locally driven. Together, through strong partnerships and local innovation, we can ensure that no community is left behind and that food security becomes a foundation for sustainable development across our region. So thank you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much. I am so pleased that you have brought the issue of food security and collaboration with farmers. That aspect does not come across so often when we talk in a network that continues to talk about cities and urbanization. But it is a very essential part of our membership and of our policy agenda. So thank you so much for that. Allow me now to give the floor to the Mayor of Bogor.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, it is an honor to represent Bogor City and Indonesia today. Indonesia believes that food security must evolve into nutrition security throughout National Free Nutrition Meal Program. We are investing not only in food, but the future of our children and our nation. Today, food security is no longer simply about food availability. Cities must address nutrition, affordability, accessibility, resilience, and social protection. This is why food security has become a central pillar for achieving multiple sustainable development goals. Indonesia Free Nutrition Meal Program is one of our most strategic investment in human capital. Its objectives are clear: reducing hunger, improving nutrition, preventing stunting, supporting education, strengthening public health, and empowering local economies. Because nutrition is an investment, not an expense. In Bogor City, we are translating this national vision into measurable local action. More than 314,000 beneficiaries have already been served, achieving nearly 84% coverage, supported by 219 nutrition service units and almost 9,000 jobs created. This program demonstrated that nutrition can generate both social and economic impact. Our experience shows the success depends on strong multi-level governance. Ladies and gentlemen, when every child receives nutrition food, we are not only fighting hunger, we are building healthier generation, stronger communities, and a more sustainable future. From Bogor City, Indonesia, we look forward to working together in ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this important message. We have one item left. This is going to happen under the leadership and the chairing of Madame Fatimetou Abdel Malik, présidente de la région de Nouakchott et coprésidente de CGLU. Madame la Présidente, à vous la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Emilia. Chers collègues, il faut dire que vous m'avez donné une tâche extrêmement difficile, c'est de capter votre attention en fin de journée, à assurer une journée aussi longue. Ce n'est pas évident, mais je vais le faire parce que ce que je vais dire est très important, ça vous concerne. Donc, on va nommer le Conseil mondial de CGLI. Conformément au statut et à la suite de l'examen effectué par la Commission des affaires statutaires, l'Assemblée générale est maintenant invitée à nommer les membres du Conseil mondial de CGLI pour le mandat 2026-2029. La composition reflète les nominations soumises par les sections et garantit une large représentativité géographique, une diversité politique et une participation équilibrée parmi l'ensemble des membres de notre organisation. Les listes complètes ont été publiées la semaine dernière et sur vos tables, vous avez un document comme celui-là. Je pense que vous l'avez lu. Sinon, il vient de tout. C'est ce qu'on a fait avec nos différentes sections. Permettez-moi un moment de remercier vivement ceux qui ont contribué à l'élaboration de ce processus. Je remercie particulièrement les membres du comité électoral, les sections pour leur travail inestimable, mais aussi le secrétariat mondial pour ce travail. Et sur ce, je vais vous demander, si vous n'avez pas d'objection, si vous n'avez pas de remarques relatives à ce Conseil mondial, de le valider par acclamation. S'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup. Permettez-moi de rappeler que les membres nominés au Conseil mondial seront appelés à exercer leur droit de vote lors des élections qui se tiendront le 25 juin. Au-delà de cette importante responsabilité, votre nomination signifie toutefois votre participation à l'organe décisionnel principal de notre organisation pour les 3 prochaines années. En tant que membre du Conseil mondial, vous serez invité à vous réunir chaque année avec des collègues du monde entier pour orienter les travaux de notre organisation et contribuer aux décisions qui façonnent notre avenir collectif. Nous nous réjouissons de vous rencontrer lors des prochaines réunions et de bénéficier de votre expérience et de vos perspectives, de votre leadership. Les années à venir seront cruciales pour notre mouvement, alors que nous contribuons à définir l'agenda au-delà de 2030 et à faire progresser les engagements issus de la coalition sociale locale. Je félicite tous les membres nouvellement nommés et me réjouis de travailler ensemble dans ce monde, dans ce nouveau chapitre de notre parcours collectif. Sur ce, je vais aussi me permettre de clôturer comme ça, vous libérer, parce qu'il y a une session tout à l'heure, une cérémonie d'ouverture. Nous sommes désormais arrivés au terme de cette Assemblée générale. Les discussions d'aujourd'hui, est-ce que tu le permets, Emilia? Tu permets que je clôture? Ou tu as autre chose à dire? Oui? Bon. Alors, les discussions d'aujourd'hui nous ont permis de réfléchir aux réalisations du mandat qui touche à sa fin, d'échanger nos points de vue sur les priorités qui guideront notre mouvement dans les années à venir et de mener à bien les étapes institutionnelles essentielles requises en vue du Conseil mondial. Dans quelques instants, nous nous réunirons à nouveau pour la cérémonie d'ouverture officielle du Congrès mondial de ce jeudi et sommet des dirigeants locaux et régionaux qui se tiendra dans l'auditorium, pas loin d'ici. Je tiens également à rappeler à tous les membres du Conseil mondial que nos réunions statutaires se poursuivront les 24 et 25 juin, c'est-à-dire demain et après-demain. Le nouveau Conseil mondial tiendra sa première session à partir de 14h demain. Venez-y. Merci à toutes et à tous pour votre participation et votre engagement. Je vous souhaite un congrès couronné de succès et me réjouis de poursuivre nos discussions au cours des prochains jours. Je vous remercie. La séance est levée. Merci. C'est un bon cadeau.
you.